Chapter 469. While Wu Qi was chasing after Miao Yihu and his companions for a distance of 10,000 miles, back in Anhe City, his celestial fiend puppets were watching the absurd scene happening in the back garden of the city lord mansion helplessly. Hundreds of flowers were blooming in the vast back garden, and the grass was green like a carpet. A restrictive barrier with a Buddhist light had shrouded the entire back garden, preventing anyone from peeping into it. Beneath the Buddhist light, Lao Ai, who had become addicted to playing tricks, had a golden relic pagoda 13 stories high above his head and a pink lotus throne under his feet. A large wheel of delight was hovering behind his head, emanating a vast Buddhist light and displaying countless enchanting scenes of the great happiness Zen technique. Wu Qi knew the origin of the golden relic pagoda. It was a feng shui pagoda found in the back mountain of Golden Pavilion Temple, a treasure used to stabilize the geomancy of the world. When Wu Qi was ransacking the treasures of Golden Pavilion Temple, Lao Ai's sharp eyes and quick hands had snatched the pagoda, making it his personal collection. The pagoda was decorated with relics left behind by the past abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple, and there were over 1,000 relics embedded in the 13-storied pagoda. It was a genuine extraordinary treasure of the Buddhist League. After being refined by Lao Ai with his great sun magic, the bright light emitted by the pagoda was imbued with an evil power that could bewitch one's mind. Currently, several dozens of enchanting girls were swaying in the bright light emitted by the pagoda. Together with the countless flying girls on the Wheel of Delight, they were putting on a show of undisguised joy. Madman Xue was sitting cross-legged off to the side, exercising his cultivation technique quietly. His soul had fused with the Wheel of Delight, and he was having sex with those flying girls. But his fleshly body was as calm as still water. The stream of primary yang flame surged out from his soul and circulated around his body, stimulating Madman Xue's 9 dragons embracing pillar. Roiling blood and energy kept flowing through his meridians, and under the nourishment of this blood and energy, Madman Xue's fleshly body gradually grew stronger and stronger, and his mind became clearer and clearer. It was a cultivation technique unique to the mystic art Lao Ai was cultivating, and Wu Qi had nothing to say about it. But the worst thing was that the little disciple Wu Qi had just taken in, Ba Jie, was currently lying on the bellies of 3 young girls who were lying in a row. He was looking at the heavenly demon dance around him helplessly. Dense evil energy flowed endlessly into Ba Jie's forehead. Half of the cracks on the saraira on his forehead had already healed. However, the once smooth and round saraira that was glowing with a pure white Buddhist light was now tinged with a layer of pink. Poor Ba Jie still had the memories of his past life. He flailed his arms and legs in terror, trying to free himself from the 3 naked girls beneath him and escape this hell of cosmetics. But the 3 young girls were grabbing his little arms and legs with their tender jade hands, playing with his small and fragile body. How could he escape? Bit by bit, the innate Buddhist nature was melted away by Lao Ai's ravaging. What was left in Beiji's mind? Who knew what it was? The celestial fiend puppet stared blankly at the absurd scene before his eyes. It took him a long time to come to his senses. After all, he was only a puppet controlled by a thread of Wu Qi's divine will. Without Wu Qi's control, his ability to adapt to changes was still a little lacking. On the other hand, after cultivating the celestial fiend Battle the Heaven script, a cultivation technique of the fiend Dao, the puppet's divine will had become cruel and had lost some of its human touch. After a brief analysis, the puppet instinctively felt that Lao Ai's behavior toward Ba Jie would not cause any harm to Wu Qi. Therefore, after a brief moment of pondering, the puppet turned and walked out of the back garden, ignoring the pitiful and pleading look Ba Jie gave him. Be it the fiend Dao, the Buddhist Dao, or the evil Dao, they all lead to the same destination. At the end of the day, Buddha and fiend are one, and the Dao and the evil Dao are one. The Dao of heaven and earth is right there. No matter which path you choose, the destination will always be the same. The puppet murmured in a low voice, clasping his hands behind his back as he walked out of the back garden. Right after he walked out of the back garden, a figure flashed before his eyes. A Taoist clad in a black Taoist robe, a pair of black gloves made from netherworm silk, and a mask forged from black metal, engraved with exquisite and magnificent patterns, appeared out of thin air in front of the puppet. The Taoist's voice was deep and powerful, filled with a strange, bewitching power that sounded like a nightmare from hell. "Fellow Taoist Greed?" asked the Taoist in a slow and gentle voice. The puppet raised his head and murmured in a similarly slow voice, "Strange, the defensive mechanism of the City Lord Mansion is personally constructed by me." The Taoist laughed, nodded, and said, "It is a very ingenious restrictive mechanism, a formation with a nearly perfect structure. Fellow Taoist Greed, I admire your attainments in the Tao of formations and restrictive mechanisms." With a flip of his palm, the Taoist took out a palm-sized talisman made from the shell of some spirit turtle and said in a deep voice, "This is a formation-breaking talisman crafted by a gold immortal grandmaster in the Tao of formation. Unless it is constructed by a gold immortal, it can be easily bypassed." The puppet was surprised and asked, "Bypassing the formation with brute force?" "A gold immortal grandmaster in the Tao of formation?" The Taoist put away the formation-breaking talisman, put both hands under his sleeves, nodded and said, "Yes, bypassing the formation with brute force. I am Bu Yunzi, the ascending immortal emissary of Myriad Immortal Alliance's Ascending Immortal Hall. My mission is to search for fellow Taoists who have the potential to join Myriad Immortal Alliance. Today, with fellow Taoist Greed's current situation, you are a very promising ally for Myriad Immortal Alliance. I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested in joining the Wandering Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance?" Immediately, the puppet sent the message to Wu Qi himself. Unlike the hell that Beiji was suffering from, the recruitment from Myriad Immortal Alliance could have a great impact on Wu Qi himself. Instinctively, the puppet sent the message. Immediately, Wu Qi's order was sent back. The puppet smiled faintly, cupped his fist and said to Bu Yunzi, "May I ask fellow Taoist, what is the origin of this Myriad Immortal Alliance?" Bu Yunzi nodded his head, and with the same slow and gentle tone, he explained the origin of Myriad Immortal Alliance to the puppet. As the name suggested, Myriad Immortal Alliance was a casual alliance formed by a large number of immortals. Among these immortals, there were itinerant cultivators, immortals from powerful immortal sects, and even immortal officials from the celestial court, as well as some other extraordinary people. The purpose of Myriad Immortal Alliance was to create a platform for information sharing, resource exchange, intelligence exchange, and mutual benefit, so that all the allies who joined the alliance could get the greatest help. The allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance were divided into several levels, and according to the contribution they made to the alliance, a spirit herb, an immortal pill, or a piece of valuable information could be converted into a detailed number of contribution points. According to the amount of contribution points, one could upgrade one's level in Myriad Immortal Alliance, and once one's level was upgraded, one could use the contribution points to ask for help from the alliance, to complete some tasks that were beyond one's capabilities. Myriad Immortal Alliance had a huge hidden power. Not only were there high officials from the Celestial Court hiding among them, there were also ghost kings and ghost saints from the ghost realm, demon kings and demon emperors from the demon realm, arhats and bodhisattvas from the Buddhist League, and even some important ministers from the Yu dynasty. Therefore, as long as the alliance's level was high enough, and they had enough contribution points, they could trade with the alliance. There was once an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance, who had just ascended to the immortal realm, obtained a high position in the Celestial Court, and successfully took control of an upper-grade heavenly realm. The puppet looked at Bu Yunzi with surprise and said, "Don't tell me we don't have to pay any price for so many benefits?" Bu Yunzi smiled faintly and said, "Myriad Immortal Alliance is a loose alliance. Apart from not attacking allies at will, there are no other restrictions. As long as allies communicate with each other, they will earn contribution points. For example, fellow Taoist Greed, if you pick a spirit herb and hand it over to the merchant run by Myriad Immortal Alliance for auction, the merchant will take a certain amount of commission from the auction, which will be converted into a certain amount of contribution points." Bu Yunzi laughed, then continued to explain, "From time to time, the Alliance will issue various missions, such as collecting certain materials, gathering certain information, and so on. As long as fellow Taoist can complete these missions, you will be rewarded with a huge amount of contribution points. As the saying goes, everyone for me, and I for everyone, this is the core principle of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Everyone for me and I for everyone? The puppet chuckled and asked straightforwardly, "May I ask who is the leader of the Union of 10,000 Immortals?" Bu Yunzi fell into silence. After a long while, he nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist Greed is indeed a knowledgeable man. As for who exactly is the leader of Myriad Immortal Alliance, I have no idea. However, it goes without saying that the leader must be an almighty expert. Apart from the leader, Myriad Immortal Alliance also has an elder council, and all the elders are extraordinary figures. They are the cornerstone of Myriad Immortal Alliance." After a brief moment of silence, the puppet asked in a deep voice, "Why did fellow Taoist come to me?" Bu Yunzi said bluntly, "Because fellow Taoist Greed is in trouble, isn't it? Not every cultivator in Myriad Immortal Alliance will pay him a visit and invite him to join us. Firstly, he has the potential, and secondly, he needs our Myriad Immortal Alliance. Once these two conditions are met, the Ascending Immortal Hall's immortal emissary will naturally come forward to invite him." The puppet laughed dryly, then pointed at himself and asked, "Could it be that Myriad Immortal Alliance thinks that I have the potential?" Bu Yunzi nodded and said, "The area 1 million miles around Anhe City is now the territory of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. This is the potential that fellow Taoist has." The puppet asked immediately, "The person who is in charge of Euphoria Heavenly Palace now is Reverend San Lu." Bu Yunzi chuckled and said, "Why do you say that, fellow Taoist Greed? Reverend San Lu, is he really the person who is in charge of Euphoria Heavenly Palace now?" Taking a deep breath, the puppet smiled bitterly and said, "It seems like you are indeed well informed." Bu Yunzi nodded his head seriously and said in a deep voice, "Naturally, Ascending Immortal Hall has allies who can gather and analyze information. Anhe City is a great foundation, and Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple are in a fierce conflict. How can we not pay attention to it?" After pondering for a long while, the puppet smiled and said, "If I kill Reverend San Lu and replace him, I wonder." Bu Yunzi smiled and said, "Myriad Immortal Alliance has all kinds of people, including demons, fiends, ghosts, freaks, deities, saints, immortals, Buddhas, and all kinds of people. As long as our allies do not attack each other, we don't care about anything else." Clapping his hands, the puppet smiled and said, "That would be great. I have no choice but to join this Myriad Immortal Alliance." Bu Yunzi laughed, then casually handed over a palm-sized, round iron medallion to the puppet. The iron medallion was extremely heavy, as it must have been fused with 5 elements gold essences that had been refined and compressed. The small iron medallion weighed at least 50 kilograms. The surface of the iron medallion was engraved with a picture of a gathering of myriad immortals, while the back was engraved with a picture of a dragon and a cloud. Between the cloud and the dragon, 3 tiny golden characters were engraved, Myriad Immortal Alliance. Bu Yunzi handed over a jade slip to Wu Qi, then gave him a few words in a deep voice. After that, his body flickered and vanished abruptly, just like how he came. The puppet received the jade slip, gave it a glance with his divine will, and was struck with a great joy. In the valley, Wu Qi, who was talking with Supremacy 3 Flame, was also struck with a great joy, and nearly burst out laughing. Chapter 470. The jade slip given to the puppet by Bu Yunzi contained some simple information about Myriad Immortal Alliance, including the addresses of several hundred merchant guilds on Pangu continent, as well as the maps of the few provinces in the vicinity where these merchant guilds were located. Just this one map alone contained the geographical maps of over 1,000 provinces in Diyu, and it was a great help to Wu Qi. Among the maps of over 1,000 provinces, Wu Qi found a place mentioned in the scroll of stealing Mount Lei Ming, which was the most remote province, in the Atlas of Exan Province. According to the scroll of stealing, there was a natural extraordinary tree, the green leaf thunder vine, that had just sprouted and grown in Mount Thunderbright. Wu Qi had no idea how it was doing now. If a natural spirit item like the green leaf thunder vine was used to craft a magical treasure, its power would be comparable to that of an innate spirit item. Wu Qi laughed complacently. The names of Mount Thunderbright and the few surrounding places were exactly the same as the records in the Scroll of Stealing. Wu Qi felt relieved immediately. It seemed like the records in the Scroll of Stealing were still useful and reliable. Cupping his fist and bowing deeply to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Greed was being too reckless just now. I hope fellow Taoist won't take it to heart. Little Shui Mei, what is the grade of your 3-flame divine needle? A magical treasure? A spirit item?" Shui Mei rolled her eyes and gave Wu Qi a glare. Supremacy 3 Flame's face blushed as he laughed dryly and said, "I crafted that 3-flame divine needle for Shui Mei to play with. It is not a magical treasure or a spirit item. It is just an ordinary magical item." While laughing, Wu Qi flipped his palm and pulled out a middle-grade spirit item, Green Melon Thorn. They were crafted by immortal Greenstaff's wife, Goddess Green Melon, using the poisonous thorns of a 30,000-year-old dragon-striped serpent rattan mixed with green scale stones. Each of them was 1 foot and 2 inches long, and as thin as a strand of hair. Once they were activated, they would turn into 33 green beams, each measuring over 100 feet long, shooting across the sky at an incredible speed without making any noise. Once they struck a human body, the paralyzing poisonous gas of the dragon-striped serpent rattan would invade the body, numbing both the cultivator's corporeal body and nascent divinity. Unless one possessed an extremely good fire attribute magical treasure, other magical treasures such as metals and jades would not be able to restrain the blue demonic thorn. After it was completed, Patriarch Yuan Hua took it to the heart-cleansing pool behind Green Cliff Mountain and refined it for 300 years. Although it could only be considered as a mid-grade spirit item because its item spirit was not strong enough, its foundation was strong enough to be ranked as an immortal item. If it was carefully nourished and refined with nascent divinity, it would have a very high chance of evolving into an immortal item in the future. Shoving the set of blue demonic thorn into Shui Mei's little hand, Wu Qi smiled and said, "This is my fault. I have no intention of damaging little Shui Mei's beloved item. This set of blue prickles was given to me by the seniors of my sect. I'll give it to little Shui Mei to protect herself." Initially, Wu Qi almost blurted out the name of the blue demonic thorn, but he suddenly realized that the Taoist name of Goddess Green Melon was embedded in the green demonic thorn. Therefore, he changed it in time and changed it to Green Prickles. Shui Mei frowned as she looked at the green demonic thorn in her hand. "What is this thing? Why does it look so light like a fake?" Wu Qi smiled and did not say a word, while Supremacy 3 Flame's brows twitched as he grabbed the green demonic thorn. He sent his divine will into the green demonic thorn, then frowned and said, "Fellow Taoist Greed, a spirit item of this level has almost become the embryo of an immortal item. TSK, as Shui Mei's cultivation base is weak, a treasure of this level." Wu Qi waved his hand and interrupted Supremacy 3 Flame. "Why are you being so polite, fellow Taoist? It's just a mere worldly possession, so what's the big deal? Shui Mei is smart and cute, and I like her the moment I see her. So, what's the point of giving her a defensive spirit item?" Shui Mei was indeed a smart girl. Seeing that Supremacy 3 Flame took the matter so seriously, she hastily jumped off the rock, grinned and gave Wu Qi 3 kowtows, and said, "Shui Mei thanks Senior for the gift. Hee, is this a spirit item? Senior is so generous. Uncle 3 Flame has never given Shui Mei anything good." Wu Qi burst out laughing. Supremacy 3 Flame scratched his nose embarrassedly and said with a wry smile, "How am I being stingy? This little girl's cultivation base is weak, and there are too many greedy people in the world. Even if I give her a magical treasure, she will still be worried that others might covet it. How would I dare to give her a good treasure?" Supremacy 3 Flame waved his hand and threw the green melon thorn to Shui Mei, then said with a very serious tone, "This is the defensive item fellow Taoist Greed gave you. Remember, do not show it in front of others unless it is absolutely necessary." After scolding Shui Mei for a long time, Supremacy 3 Flame fished out a pitch-black flying sword from under his sleeve, which looked like a mediocre magical item at first glance. He gave it to Shui Mei and said, "Use this flying sword to play. Do you understand?" Wu Qi kept nodding as he watched. Supremacy 3 Flame was a very cautious man. Shui had yet to recover from the excitement of obtaining a spirit tool when she suddenly saw the bald and ugly flying sword. She immediately pouted her little mouth high. However, it was obvious that Supremacy 3 Flame held a very high position in her heart. Although her heart was filled with reluctance, she still took the flying sword, carefully cut her finger with the sword's edge, and used her blood to draw a sword-controlling rune on the blade. After that, Wu Qi pointed at Shui Mei and used her blood to refine all 33 green melon thorns. The green melon thorn transformed into a wisp of green light and soared into the sky, wheeling a few times around Shui Mei before fusing into her hair bun. After that, the green light fused with all 33 strands of hair, and no one could see anything wrong with them from the outside. Hair was blood, and the long hair of a woman was closely related to her bloodline. When the green melon thorn fused with the hair, it could absorb the blood essence in Shui Mei's body through the hair, slowly nourishing and refining it. At the same time, it could also solve the problem of Shui Mei's low cultivation base and the fact that she had not even opened her spiritual ocean, which prevented her from storing a spirit item in her body. When everything was done, Supremacy 3 Flame cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi to express his gratitude. Although Supremacy 3 Flame did not say much, Wu Qi could tell that he was a straightforward man, and he had acknowledged the friendship between him and Wu Qi. Through the green melon thorn, Wu Qi's goodwill toward him, as well as Wu Qi's intention of befriending Supremacy 3 Flame, had been clearly revealed. After chatting with Supremacy 3 Flame for a while, Wu Qi pointed at the 3 flying ships in the valley and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, please keep these flying ships and follow me to Anhe City. The smell here is very unpleasant. After all, Shui Mei is still very young, and the scenery here is not very pleasant." Supremacy 3 Flame twitched the corner of his mouth, revealing a bitter smile as he shook his head lightly. The valley was filled with holes caused by his flame thunders, and the ground was strewn with broken corpses. Most of them had been burned to ashes, and only a few bones and rotten flesh were left sticking to the ground. A pungent burnt smell lingered in the air. Some people would believe it if they were told that this place was the hell of Azura. It was indeed not suitable for a little girl like Shui Mei to stay here for too long. What surprised Wu Qi was that Shui Mei shook her head disapprovingly. She smiled indifferently and said, "Don't worry, Uncle Greed. It's just a few dead people. Shui Mei is used to it." Wu Qi was struck dumb. Used to it? He gave Supremacy 3 Flame a surprised look. Supremacy 3 Flame hastily shook his head, then spun and walked toward the 3 flying ships. Sending a thread of divine will to Wu Qi, Supremacy 3 Flame explained in a soft voice. When Shui Mei was young, her clan was struck by a great calamity. All the old and young people in her clan were slaughtered by the local garrison general. I was late, and could only save her from the butcher's blade. Supremacy 3 Flame sighed faintly and said in a deep voice, at that time, she could already remember what happened. She watched helplessly as her parents were beheaded and killed. Wu Qi did not say a word, and Supremacy 3 Flame did not say a word either. He came before the 3 flying ships, performed an incantation gesture, and put them into his storage ring. Wu Qi laughed and waved his sleeve. A gust of strong wind rolled up Shui Mei and brought her flying back to Anhe City. Supremacy 3 Flame chuckled, stepping on a flaming cloud and following closely behind. Both of them were chatting along the way. Wu Qi had the intention of befriending Supremacy 3 Flame, so they exchanged some strange anecdotes and talked about their experiences in the Tao. There were a few profound scriptures in Wu Qi's mind, each of which was a supreme mystic scripture that could lead one to the realm of Gold Immortal or even Primordial Immortal. He randomly picked a few lines from them and repeated them to Supremacy 3 Flame, making him look like a yes man and treat Wu Qi as a celestial being. Both of them traveled at high speed, and before long, they had arrived at Anhe City. Wu Qi led Supremacy 3 Flame and Shui Mei into the great hall of the City Lord Mansion, where the celestial fiend puppet who had transformed into Wu Qi's clone was sitting with a straight back. When he saw Wu Qi enter the hall, he immediately rose to his feet, bowed to Wu Qi, and said in a deep voice, "True self." Wu Qi answered coolly, then waved his hand at the celestial fiend puppet. Immediately, the puppet transformed into a shadow and fused with Wu Qi's body. With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi smiled at Supremacy 3 Flame, who was dumbstruck, and said, "Fellow Taoist, just now, when you mentioned that you are a member of Myriad Immortal Alliance, an emissary from the Ascending Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance found my clone. Here is the iron medallion and jade slip he gave me." With a subtle smile on his face, Wu Qi handed the iron medallion and jade slip to Supremacy 3 Flame. Supremacy 3 Flame took a deep breath and stared at Wu Qi with a look of disbelief. Incarnation? This is a mighty divine ability that only a gold immortal, or at least an upper-grade heaven immortal, can cultivate. Fellow Taoist greed's cultivation base. Supremacy 3 Flame's attitude towards Wu Qi changed once again after a few words of praise. The few incantations Wu Qi recited just now had already made Supremacy 3 Flame gasp in admiration. However, he thought that Wu Qi had inherited the legacy of a good master. But Wu Qi had just revealed the ability of incarnation, and it was not something that could be achieved by inheriting the legacy of a good master. According to Supremacy 3 Flame's knowledge, only someone with the overall strength of a heaven immortal could create an incarnation, and the aura emanating from Wu Qi was clearly that of a nascent soul cultivator. Possessing the overall strength of a heaven immortal with just a nascent soul cultivation base, Wu Qi's divine ability was truly frightening. All of a sudden, Supremacy 3 Flame had placed Wu Qi in a position that was equal to, or even slightly higher than, himself. Wu Qi gladly sensed the change in Supremacy 3 Flame's words. He nodded and said with a smile, "With that, we are now allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance. I've just joined the alliance, and there are still many things that I need your guidance on." Supremacy 3 Flame kept laughing. He pulled out a golden medallion and showed it to Wu Qi, then nodded and said, "That is only natural. I have a few best friends in Myriad Immortal Alliance, and I can introduce them to you." Both men exchanged a smile, having a tacit understanding. Right at that moment, Lao Ai's deep, hoarse voice, which was filled with an eerie evil power, suddenly rang out. "Oh, where did this little girl come from? She is indeed a beauty. How can she be so cute and delicate?" Chapter 471. What Lao Ai said nearly provoked Supremacy 3 Flame into attacking him. Anyone who glanced at him would not think that he was a good citizen. It would have been fine if Lao Ai were to comment on Supremacy 3 Flame directly, but he just had to comment on Shui Mei with a frivolous tone, which offended Supremacy 3 Flame's reverse scale. He nearly released the dragon skin fire sac and burned Lao Ai alive. Supremacy 3 Flame had a cultivation base of 26th tier heaven immortal. His dragon skin fire sac could shoot out 9 types of true flames of pure yang and 9 types of dark flames of extreme yin. He was also an expert in the art of talisman crafting, and the various fire and thunder talismans he crafted were very popular in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Although he was a 26th tier heaven immortal, he was a violent man. Once he struck, he would not show any mercy, and he had a desperate spirit. Once, with a cultivation base of 26th tier, he had killed a 23rd tier heaven immortal. Therefore, he was a famous figure in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Fortunately, Wu Qi stopped Supremacy 3 Flame in time. Otherwise, if Supremacy 3 Flame were to strike, Lao Ai would definitely be turned into ashes. Mo tried every possible way to stop Supremacy 3 Flame. Knowing that his words had brought him trouble, Lao Ai's face darkened as he carefully apologized to Supremacy 3 Flame. Only then did he slip out of the hall in a flustered manner, not daring to stay any longer. Lao Ai was depressed. Why did Wu Qi always make friends with people like this? How could a nascent soul cultivator befriend a heaven immortal so easily? It puzzled Lao Ai. Putting aside the gloomy Lao Ai, Wu Qi gave the order to prepare a banquet in the parlor in the backyard. Wu Qi and Supremacy 3 Flames sat on the main seats, while Shui Mei accompanied them. The host and guests drank to their heart's content, while Supremacy 3 Flame explained to Wu Qi in detail what he knew about Myriad Immortal Alliance, allowing Wu Qi to learn more about it. The more they talked, the more frightened Wu Qi became. Could it be that Supremacy 3 Flame had suddenly come to Anhe City and attacked the human army led by Miao Yihu because of the bounty offered by Myriad Immortal Alliance? Killing Miao Yihu gave him 100 contribution points, killing a human soldier gave him 1 point, and killing an oracle gave him 5 points. After wiping out the army led by Miao Yihu, Supremacy 3 Flame had obtained nearly 3,000 contribution points, which were more than enough to exchange for a few bottles of immortal pills or a lower-grade immortal item in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Supremacy 3 Flame was a hot-tempered man, a ruthless and merciless man who killed without mercy. Because Shui Mei's family was wiped out, her father was Supremacy 3 Flame's best friend. Since Supremacy 3 Flame could not deal with the garrison general who led an army to slaughter Shui Mei's entire family, he had been finding trouble with the officials and small armies of Yu Dynasty for the past few years. In the past 3 to 5 years, he had killed nearly 100,000 soldiers of Yu Dynasty. The deaths of 100,000 dead souls had brought him nearly 300,000 contribution points. Coupled with the flying ships and other valuables he had plundered, Supremacy 3 Flame was now very wealthy. His status in Myriad Immortal Alliance had also been upgraded from a silver plate ally to a gold plate ally. Can I get contribution points by killing human soldiers? Wu Qi picked up a wine cup and took a sip, then looked at Supremacy 3 Flame curiously and asked, "Can I get contribution points by killing them at will?" Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head and said with a smile, "How can I kill them at will? Isn't that going to cause a great mess?" Fellow Taoist greed, please send your divine will into the Iron Medallion, and you will see the few bounty lists of Myriad Immortal Alliance inside. Wu Qi nodded and sent his divine will into the Iron Medallion. A strange light flickered before his eyes, and the first thing that appeared before him was a row of large characters, Taoist greed from Euphoria Heavenly Palace of Anhe City. Surprisingly, there was a restrictive spell in the Iron Medallion, indicating the identity and origin of Wu Qi's current identity. As his divine will went through the row of characters, a bright light shone in front of him, and a space about 1 acre in circumference suddenly appeared. A few streams of light poured down from the sky, rolling down with purple gold characters sliding down from them. Wu Qi's divine will approached the few streams of light, and immediately, a great amount of information came pouring into his mind. The stream of light closest to Wu Qi was a bounty list for killing people. For example, the left judge of Punishment Court in Diu Province had been offered 10 immortal stones for his life, and the reward would be increased to 15 immortal stones if the person could wipe out his entire family. Behind this reward was a note from the Union of 10,000 Immortals. Given that the existence of this left disciplinary officer has seriously threatened the safety of some allies of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, anyone who can kill this person will be rewarded with 1,000 contribution points. Apart from that, there was another reward, which was a private matter of an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance. He had offered a reward of 50 immortal stones, asking a mighty immortal in the alliance to help him subdue a huge ancient demon, the Claw Giant Prawn, who had the cultivation base of a 23rd tier heaven immortal, who was hiding in the water margin in Huang Province. The person who offered the reward asked for the inner core and soul of this giant prawn, while the rest of the shell, blood, and flesh would belong to the person who offered the reward. There was another bounty list that was particularly interesting. An ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance was cursing on the bounty list. Apparently, this ally was an immortal from the Fiend League. He had secretly released a plague somewhere in Diu Province, killing over 1 million mortals and harvesting their souls to refine his magical treasure. As a result, just as his magical treasure was about to take shape, 3 eminent monks of the Buddhist League passed by and attacked this immortal from the Fiend League, forcing him to flee with one of his arms broken. As for the fiend treasure that was about to take shape, the 3 eminent monks sent it to the afterlife using the Dharma. The request of this ally was to wash the Great Ming Courtyard, where the 3 eminent monks of the Buddhist League resided, with a total reward of 100 immortal stones, as well as various rare and strange materials, and some spirit herbs that could last for over 10,000 years. At the end of the bounty list, he also indicated that he hoped that the Buddhist cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance would not tip off the Great Ming courtyard, so as to fulfill the friendship of his ally. Smiling, Wu Qi turned his attention to the other few screens. On one of them, a purple golden character was sliding down at a high speed. It stated that a certain criminal officer of Zhong Province's punishment court had led a group of soldiers and killed several dozens of cultivators around Mount Helan, 2 of whom were the allies of Myriad Immortals. He hoped that the allies who were closest to Mount Helan would immediately strike and kill this criminal officer along with his soldiers. The reward was also marked with the number of contribution points one could get from killing the criminal officer and his soldiers. Just as Supremacy 3 Flame had said, killing the criminal officer would get 100 points, killing his soldiers would get 1 point, and the oracles who accompanied the army would get 5 points. Following that, another set of purplish gold words fell. This time, the purplish gold words shone with a dazzling light and emitted frightening waves of spirit qi. With a thought, Wu Qi was almost forced to direct all of his divine will into the bounty. Supremacy 3 Flame, who was sitting right next to Wu Qi, exclaimed as well. Hastily, he took out the golden medallion with the character written on it and sent his divine will into it as well. Wu Qi noticed that there was a purple golden gleam flashing on Supremacy 3 Flame's medallion, and a faint energy fluctuation was rushing out from it. Clearly, this was the method used by the person in charge of Myriad Immortal Alliance to inform all the allies that a mission of great value had appeared. Hastily, he sent his divine will into the golden character that hovered in midair, and a message quickly fused into Wu Qi's divine will. It was the reward list issued by the Supreme Council of Elders of the Divine Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance, asking all the allies to do their best to search for 179 rare immortal herbs and spirit herbs. Behind each immortal grass and spirit medicine was a huge number. It was millions of contribution points, representing a huge amount of wealth and benefits. Among the 179 immortal herbs and spirit herbs, 133 of them were marked with their possible locations, and it was clearly stated that these immortal herbs and spirit herbs could be found in certain places. However, due to the great distance, it was extremely difficult to pick all these immortal herbs and spirit herbs at the same time. Therefore, the reward list asked the cultivators who were closest to those locations to pick these immortal herbs and spirit herbs as soon as possible, and then send them to the nearest merchant of Myriad Immortal Alliance at the fastest speed. As for the other 46 immortal herbs and spirit herbs, their possible locations were not given. The notice only stated the names, aliases, and nicknames of these immortal herbs and spirit herbs, as well as their shapes, odors, characteristics, hobbies, and so on. On the topmost row, there was a row of large characters that were shrouded in purple mist. It was a reward for the spirit liquid condensed from the essence of a high-grade Ganoderma Immortal. A single drop of high-grade Ganoderma Immortal Spirit Liquid could be exchanged for 3 million contribution points or a high-grade Immortal Artifact. At the end of the line of characters was a special note. Myriad Immortal Alliance guarantees the absolute safety of the person who provides the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid, and the person will be protected by the Supreme Council of Elders of the Divine Hall. An upper-grade immortal item? Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown, then shook his head lightly. It was not worth it for him to offer the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid to Myriad Immortal Alliance just for the promise of an upper-grade immortal item. However, among the 179 spirit herbs, 3 of them happened to be in Wu Qi's possession. Before leaving Myriad Immortal's planet, Wu Qi had looted the secret vault of Great Yan Dynasty, and he had looted countless spirit herbs from it. Coincidentally, there were 3 spirit herbs that had matured for a period of 1 period, and they were on the reward list. According to the price, these 3 spirit herbs could be exchanged for 3 million contribution points. It was a huge sum of money, and it was more than enough for Wu Qi to exchange for an upper-grade immortal item. So, why would he take the risk and give away the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid? All of a sudden, Supremacy 3 Flame burst into a loud laughter. He slapped the table and said, Wonderful! I happen to have a flaming lilac and a half of a purple orchid earth centipede's rhizome. They are the treasures I found by accident when I was looting. Aha! I'm going to be rich this time. Rising to his feet cheerfully, Supremacy 3 Flames smiled at Wu Qi and said, "Fellow Taoist, it's better to get something like this sooner rather than later. The nearest merchant of Myriad Immortal Alliance to Anhe City is in Xianglu City, which is 3 million miles away. I'll hurry up and offer these 2 spirit herbs to them. Don't let others take the lead." Upon hearing that, Wu Qi rose to his feet hastily and said with a smile, "That's great. I do have 2 spirit herbs with me." Supremacy 3 Flame was struck dumb for a long while, then he clapped his hands and said happily, "Wonderful! I did not expect fellow Taoists to be so rich. Let's go now. Or else, if someone takes the lead, the reward will end as soon as the reward is completed. If we are late, there will be no benefits." Wu Qi answered hastily. He clapped his hands and called Eugene over, giving him a few instructions. Eugene answered submissively. After that, Wu Qi and Supremacy 3 Flame rushed out of the parlor, riding a cloud and heading southwest towards Xianglu City. As for Xue Mei, Supremacy 3 Flame left her in the City Lord Mansion, under the protection of Wu Qi's 2 clones. The cloud moved at a high speed, and very soon, Wu Qi and Supremacy 3 Flame had gone far away. Chapter 472. In the gloomy and deep hall of Great Yan Dynasty's Garden of Zhonglu, Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan were kneeling before Princess Zhonglu. Yan Dan unleashed his immortal energy and tightly bound Princess Zhonglu. No matter how hard Princess Zhonglu struggled, she could only accept the request of Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan. Zi Xian, the rise and fall of Ji clan of Great Yan depends on you. This time, when you follow Wu Qi and leave Myriad Immortal's planet, it is the only chance for us. Our life and death, honor and disgrace are all in your hands. Muffled thunderclaps rumbled outside the window. Lightning bolts streaked across the night sky and shone into the hall, illuminating the faces of Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan. Princess Zhang Li's eyes went wide with terror as she stared blankly at her grandfather and father. Her mind was in a great turmoil. The unpredictable innate divine energy in her body went out of control. Princess Zhonglu, who was meditating on the profound mysteries of heaven and earth while facing the morning sun from the east on a reef, suddenly trembled and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed and fell onto the reef. Her eyes were tightly shut, and the words Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan told her when she left Myriad Immortal's planet kept flashing in her mind. Her mind was in a great turmoil. Suddenly, Princess Zhonglu opened her eyes. A 5-colored cloud rose up under her feet, and she stepped on it and flew toward Green Cliff Mountain at the fastest speed. At the back of Green Cliff Mountain, right next to the heart-cleansing pool, Princess Zhonglu sat cross-legged with both hands locked into an incantation gesture before her chest. She closed her eyes and entered a deep meditative state. The natural energies within 10,000 miles were attracted by some magical force, swirling and gathering toward Princess Zhonglu. Rain and mist rose from the back of Green Cliff Mountain, and a fine drizzle mixed with rich natural energies was falling from the sky, nourishing the land within 1,000 miles of the back of the mountain. With the nourishment of this rainwater mixed with rich spiritual energy, the back of the Green Cliff Mountain had become an exceptionally fertile spiritual land. Lingji, ginseng, fleeceflower, and other spirit herbs that had just sprouted could be seen everywhere. Some rare herb seeds had also just emerged from the ground. At a glance, the forest was filled with lush green sprouts, and a strange fragrance reverberated in the forest. This was the effect of a person with the primordial divine spirit bloodline on a dignified immortal sect. Many of the spirit herbs were already extinct on the Green Cliff planet, and could not even be found in the Pueyuo heavenly realm. After Wu Qi left for Panga continent, Patriarch Yuan Hua had gone to great lengths to collect and trade the seeds of some extinct spirit herbs, which he planted in the back of Green Cliff Mountain. Because of Princess Zhonglu, the back mountain of the Green Cliff Mountain had good weather and abundant spiritual qi. There was even a strange vitality hidden in it, And all these elixirs that were extremely difficult to cultivate had all sprouted smoothly. As long as they were carefully taken care of and cultivated with utmost care, Yuan Hua sect would be able to usher in a bountiful harvest in several tens of thousands of years. There were over 47,000 newly planted spirit herb seeds, and over 35,000 of them were extremely rare. It was said that only a small number of them were planted in the mansions of some almighty experts in the world of immortal cultivators. On the other hand, in the back mountain of the Green Cliff Mountain, these spirit herbs, which were extremely rare in all the heavenly realms, were thriving and growing vigorously. Princess Zhangli took a deep breath, forcibly expelling some bad thoughts from her mind. However, when she saw Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan kneeling before her, their faces filled with despair and unwillingness, the words they said made Princess Zhangli's heart twitch, and she nearly lost control of her divine energy once again. I won't think about these things when I'm with him. How long has it been since he left? It's only been a little over 3 years, but why can't he control his inner demons anymore? This shouldn't be the case. I'm protected by the divine flame of order, so it's impossible for any inner demons to harm me. This is not an inner demon, but my own obsession. I can't get rid of it with any external force, and I can only break it with my own willpower. But why should I be obsessed with the rise and fall of Great Yan's Ji clan? I, Ji Zixuan, am just a girl. I just want to live a peaceful life with Wu Qi. The years of a heaven immortal are endless, and I want to live a peaceful life with him. Why do you have to entrust the life and death of Ji clan to me? You heroic men, you heroes, what are you doing? She gently waved her right hand and thrust it out from a distance. Several dozens of huge trees in front of her disintegrated soundlessly, turning into faint energies that spread in all directions. Princess Zhangli clenched her jaws and said, the life and death of Ji clan should not depend on me. Wu Qi, you have no reason to ask me to force Wu Qi to risk his life for you. Far off in the distance, Patriarch Yuan Hua was seen sitting cross-legged on a white cloud, his hands placed before his dantian, his eyes closed as he meditated. His aura was completely restrained inside his body, not leaking out at all. Standing next to him was a handsome young man, clad in a white robe, white leather boots, and a white jade crown on his head. He looked like a silver doll himself, his skin as white as snow. Patriarch Yuan Hua's surname was Zi, and this young man was his 19th generation grandson in the mortal world, Zi Yuexin. Zi Yuexin, who was less than 30 years old, was a cultivation genius of Zi clan, and was nurtured and protected by Patriarch Yuan Hua. Despite that, Patriarch Yuan Hua had given him several times of enlightenment, using his own energy essence to change his tendons and cleanse his marrows, and imbuing him with a great amount of enlightenment of the heaven and earth. With that, Zi Yuexin's cultivation base was forcibly pushed to the peak stage of nascent divinity realm. With just one small step, Zi Yuexin would become a heaven immortal. Patriarch Yuan Hua had never told anyone about his relatives, and the people of Zi clan had been living in seclusion on a planet dominated by mortals in Puyo heavenly realm. The people of Zi clan had always kept a very low profile, living in seclusion and rarely venturing out. All they did was cultivate, cultivate, and cultivate. Zi Yuexin was the one whom Patriarch Yuan Hua had painstakingly trained, the candidate who would help him break through the realm of Gold Immortal. In order to fulfill the promise made by the severely wounded immortal, Patriarch Yuan Hua had put in a lot of effort and meticulously laid out many plans. This girl, Zi Xian, is an excellent one. Patriarch Yuan Hua opened his eyes and sighed softly. She possesses the bloodline of ancient gods, and she has already formed an innate divine soul. With her around, Yuan Hua sect will prosper, and our clan will gain great benefits as well. Zi Yuexin bent her waist slightly, listening to Patriarch Yuan Hua's words. Shaking his head, Patriarch Yuan Hua said indifferently, "Unfortunately, she is Wu Qi's lover." After a long moment of silence, a blush flashed across Patriarch Yuan Hua's face as he said in a low voice, "Wu Qi is a man of deep schemes, and his background is unfathomable. Although it was Jiang Yun who brought him to our sect, it really makes me feel uneasy. With just a mere nascent soul cultivation base, he is able to fight against a heaven immortal. Is this something that little Jiang Yun can teach? Ziyuexin turned her head and gave Princess Zhang Lu a measuring glance. Suddenly, a charming smile appeared on her face as she said, "What do you mean, Patriarch?" Patriarch Yuan Hua breathed out a long sigh, nodded slowly and said, "Zi Xian is a good girl. With her around, Yuan Hua sect will prosper, and so will Zi clan. Just look at the sprouts of spirit herbs all over the mountains, and you can see that with or without her, Yuan Hua sect will be in a completely different situation." Patriarch Yuan Hua closed his eyes once again, shook his head and said, "She has Wu Qi in her heart, and that is not good. Wu Qi is an unfathomable young man with great ambitions. With such a low cultivation base, I can't believe he has the courage to venture into Pangu continent. If it were any other disciple of Yuan Hua sect, I would never allow him to do so. But, since he wants to go, not only did Patriarch allow him to go, I even gave him a few spirit items to boost his courage." Ziyuexin understood. He bowed and said, "I'll go get close to Princess Zhang Lu now. If I can win her heart." Patriarch Yuan Hua said coolly, "Make her unable to leave you, which means she will be unable to leave Yuan Hua sect and Z clan. If you can do that, you will be the clan master of Z clan. It is said that Wu Qi will return to Green Cliff Planet within 100 years. You have plenty of time to accomplish this." After a brief moment of silence, Ziyuexin smiled and said, "Wouldn't it be better if Wu Qi never returns to Green Cliff Planet?" After a long moment of silence, Patriarch Yuan Hua's body slowly disappeared amidst the rosy clouds. His voice was heard coming quietly, "Cheer, Emol Wan, and Emol Wan have gone to Pangu continent." Just half a month after Wu Qi departed, Emol Wan, and Emol Wan have left for Pangu continent with the excuse that they are in secluded cultivation. Ziyuexin narrowed his eyes and smiled. He praised in a low voice, "Patriarch, you have taken every conceivable possibility into consideration. It must be done. She is just a little girl, isn't she a piece of cake? I've tasted too many beautiful girls under the heaven, and now, she has the bloodline of ancient gods? Tiske, I guess that will be even more exciting, right?" Ziyuexin sneered, then carefully fished out a fist-sized sparrow from under his sleeve. It had a pair of fiery eyes, and its body was covered with green feathers. He casually threw it out. With a few flaps of its wings, the sparrow immediately transformed into a beam of green light and flew towards Princess Zhang Li's direction. Ziyuexin produced a strange-shaped longsword, which transformed into an arc of light and wrapped around his body. With a solemn face, he fixed his eyes on the sparrow that was fleeing in front of him and gave chase at top speed. In just a few breaths of time, Ziyuexin had arrived above Heart Cleaning Pool. He cast a restrictive spell with his right hand, freezing the sparrow in midair. "Where do you think you are going? I'll find you a good master, okay?" Princess Zhang Lu opened her eyes abruptly and stared coldly at Ziyuexin, who was hovering in the sky. Ziyuexin gave Princess Zhang Lu a glance in astonishment, then quickly stopped the sword beam, cupped his fist and bowed to Princess Zhang Lu with a smile on his face. "Young lady, please forgive me for disturbing you. It's my sister's birthday in a few days. It's rare for me to see this jade aureole, so I wanted to capture it and give it to my sister. I didn't expect that it would disturb you, young lady. Please forgive me." Upon hearing Ziyuexin's words, Princess Zhang Lu, who was already in a bad mood, snorted coldly and rose to her feet. A cloud rose under her feet, and without giving Ziyuexin a glance, she rode the cloud and flew up into the sky. Ziyuexin was taken aback. He had never met a girl with such a character. For a moment he was a little flustered. Hastily, he rode the sword beam and flew up into the sky, catching up to Princess Zhang Lu and asking with a loud voice, "Yuexin, please forgive me. Are you a disciple of Yuan Hua sect?" Get lost. The unruly temper of Princess Zhang Lu, which had not been seen for a long time, suddenly flared up. She pointed her finger out and unleashed her innate divine energy. Several dozens of lightning bolts, each as thick as a water tank, came whistling down from the sky, striking straight onto Ziyuexin, who was caught off guard. A loud cracking noise rang out, and Ziweshin fell to the ground with a miserable howl, his body covered in black smoke. The innate thunderbolts had broken his bones and torn his tendons, and at least 70% of his muscles were carbonized. Even his defensive spirit item, the Dragon Cloud Centipede, was smashed to pieces. He was nearly killed on the spot. Princess Zhanglu snorted coldly, then stepped on the cloud and flew away. Suddenly, a twisted figure came next to Ziweshin, who was covered in charred skin. The figure laughed and said in a low voice, "Brother Z, you can't do this." Ziweshin howled in pain, lowered her voice, and began cursing hysterically. Chapter 473. Stepping on a cloud, Wu Qi and Supremacy 3 Flame flew at top speed towards Xianglu City. Supremacy 3 Flame was indeed a straightforward man. Along the way, Wu Qi heard him talking nonstop, and for some unknown reason, he suddenly brought up the topic of when he first stepped onto the Tao of Immortality, and the reason why he had been cultivating diligently and never dared to bring it along with him. Back in those days, I was extremely lucky. I was planning to capture 2 wild boars in the mountain, butcher them, and sell them in the city. In the end, I found a book called Great Red Flame Dazzling Scripture in the Wild Boar's Cave. I even have a supreme-grade fire element energy vein. This book is tailor-made for me. See, in just 1,000 years, I've become an immortal. Since I've just started cultivating, all I want is immortality. But, are you talking about the Human Emperor's ban? TSK, there are indeed countless mortals who obey the Human Emperor's ban. Even if an immortal pill is placed right in front of them and they can become an immortal by consuming it, they will still not consume it. But, I'm different from them. Originally, Lord Daozu was from a family of officials. But after he committed a crime, his family fell into decline. As the son of a marquis, I ended up becoming a butcher who slaughters pigs and sells them. How many people have rolled their eyes at me, and how many times have I been bullied? What does the Human Emperor's ban have to do with me? Tisk, when the Great Red Flame Dazzling Scripture was placed in front of Lao Tzu. No, I mean me, I knew I was going to be rich and immortality was right before my eyes. At that time, why would I care about something like the Human Emperor's ban? I brought the treasure with me and found an active volcano to cultivate in seclusion. Lord Daozu is, after all, a high official of DU, so I do have some common knowledge about cultivation. Cultivating a fire element cultivation technique next to a volcano is definitely the right choice. Immortality. For the sake of immortality, I did not sleep, rest, eat, or drink. I cultivated for 1,000 years and ascended to become an immortal. After becoming a divine immortal, I thought that I could be arrogant for a while. So, I accepted the invitation of the Celestial Court and ascended to the Celestial Court. I thought that I could become an official in the Celestial Court and live a good life from then on. I could sleep with any beautiful fairies that caught my fancy, and the boundless happiness of love and leisure was waiting for me. Fellow Taoist greed, take a guess. What can a newly ascended 36th tier heaven immortal like me do in the Celestial Court? Supremacy 3 Flame looked at Wu Qi with a mysterious expression. Wu Qi shook his head with a smile. How could he know what a 36th tier heaven immortal could do in the Celestial Court? Supremacy 3 Flame's face fell. Coachman, he said through clenched teeth. Using a 36th tier heaven immortal as a coachman. It would be fine if I were to serve those primordial immortals and gold immortals, but my first job was to be a coachman in the mansion of a celestial official of the fire department of the Celestial Court, feeding and washing the horses for the bastard son of his 38th concubine. That little fellow has a Lao Tzu as an celestial official of the Celestial Court, but his cultivation base is only at the Jin Dan realm. Supremacy 3 Flame patted his chest and said angrily, as a mighty heaven immortal, I was forced to kneel on the ground and serve as a stake for that little fellow to mount his horse. Wu Qi was horrified. What happened after that? He asked hastily. With a wry smile on his face, Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head and said, after that, I purposely made a mistake and was punished with 180 dragon skin whips. I was stripped of my immortal status and chased out of the celestial court. Since then, I've been living on Pangu continent. Hee hee, you can say that I've become a bandit, or that I've given up on myself. Supremacy 3 Flames smacked his lips and said with a cold grin, since then, I've seen through everything. Since I'm a cultivator of immortality, why should I serve as a servant in the celestial court? Since then, I've been working hard in my cultivation, working hard to earn energy stones and immortal stones, accumulating my wealth. I can still eat and drink well, and beautiful female cultivators are still lining up to sleep with me. See, my luck with women is endless. Wu Qi gave him a thumbs up and said smilingly, fellow Taoist, is the reason you cultivate to be an immortal, to eat and drink well, and to do that? Supremacy 3 Flame grinned as he stroked his black beard and said in a low voice, Tiske, why do you think I kept that little girl Shui Mei in your mansion? Since I saved her 4 years ago, with this stalker following me around, I haven't tasted the taste of meat for 4 years. When I go to Xianglu City this time, I must find a group of beauties and fuck them for 3 days and 3 nights. Pulling his beard, Supremacy 3 Flame threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh as he said, those mortals only seek glory, splendor, wealth, and a position where they stand above all others. What else can we, the immortal cultivators, seek? Eat well, drink well, sleep well on the bed at night, walk on the street during the day, and be respected and feared by everyone who saw you. You have such a reputation. If we don't have this little pursuit, why do we, the heaven immortals, cultivate all day long? Wu Qi opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he did not say anything for a long while. Supremacy 3 Flames smiled and said, why? Have you thought of something? Fellow Taoist, what is the purpose of your immortal cultivation? Wu Qi remained silent for a long while, frowning deeply. At last, he breathed out a faint sigh and said, what is the purpose of my immortal cultivation? I was fucking forced to do it. I've never thought that I would cultivate immortal cultivation, and I've never even thought about something like cultivating immortal cultivation. The place where I come from is different from you, fellow Taoist. You know that there are immortals in this world, and that there are people who don't age or die. Perhaps you've thought about this a lot since you were young. Tilting his head to one side, Wu Qi looked at a cloud flying across the sky and said with a blank expression, but what is the purpose of my immortal cultivation? I've never thought about cultivating immortal cultivation. Since I was young, I've always thought that following Master, Xiao Bai, and the others, doing a few beautiful jobs, earning a large sum of money, and then having fun together was the best thing in the world. Even back then, I didn't know what women were. Supremacy 3 Flame looked solemnly at Wu Qi and warned, then, you have to understand that women are the most wonderful things in the world. No matter how angry or resentful you are, you can just find a smooth and tender woman and have a good night with her. Then, all your anger will be appeased. Supremacy 3 Flame clicked his tongue and praised, then pointed his finger at the sky and said, my current goal is to cultivate to the realm of gold immortal, then go to the celestial court and have a good night with a few beautiful female immortals that only those gold immortals can touch. Wu Qi paid no attention to Supremacy 3 Flames' teasing. He frowned and said, but I came to this place out of nowhere, and started cultivating immortal cultivation out of nowhere. I've never thought that I would be immortal, never thought that I would be immortal, and never thought that I would be able to do something with such a long life. Let's take revenge first. After pondering for a full hour, he smiled and said to Supremacy 3 Flame, first, I need to avenge my master and those brothers of mine. I want to wipe out that sect from top to bottom and exterminate every single member of that sect from top to bottom. After that, with a leisurely smile, Wu Qi looked at Supremacy 3 Flame and said, after that, I'll be with the woman I like now, or travel the world, or find a place to live in seclusion. Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head with a strange expression. He gave Wu Qi a heavy slap and said with a long sigh, brother, you're wrong. Travel the world or live in seclusion with the woman I like. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Grinning coldly, Supremacy 3 Flame pointed at the path where he came from and said, Once you step onto the path of immortal cultivation, you can't retreat, you can only move forward. You can only move forward with all your strength. Travel the world or live in seclusion. If you have such a thought, you're dead meat. Grinning coldly, Supremacy 3 Flame said in a ferocious voice. Shui Mei's father, Lao Tzu's best friend in life and death, met a woman whom he said he owed too much in his previous life, and brought her to live in seclusion in her clan. After living in seclusion for 20 years, she gave birth to a girl. Before Lao Tzu could express his gratitude, he heard that they had offended someone, and were surrounded by a great army. Supremacy 3 Flame breathed out a long sigh, then grinned hideously and said, their entire clan was executed, and their bodies were torn into 1,000 pieces. All the women were ravaged dozens or hundreds of times before they were killed. Only Shui Mei was left, and I was lucky enough to save her. Slapping hard on Wu Qi's shoulder, Supremacy 3 Flame said in a ferocious voice, the world of immortal cultivators is a damned dog-eat-dog world. Since you're already here, don't ever think you can let this matter rest. If you don't kill them, they will kill you. If you don't rob them, they will rob you. If you don't ruin their business, they will ruin yours. Every step you take is filled with danger, and every step you take is filled with killing intent. Most of the time, apart from yourself, you can't even trust the woman who is sleeping next to you, the one you fucked until she calls you husband. Pointing at the sky, Supremacy 3 Flame laughed and said, this is the world of immortal cultivators. Fellow Taoist greed, my brother, this is the world of immortal cultivators. Wu Qi's expression flickered slightly as he recalled all the things that had happened after he arrived in this world. Yi Yen, Lu Suifeng, Wei Xiaoxiao, Yu Qianqian, Yu Heda, and many others, including Yu Hehuan, Yu Miao, Feng Qingya, and Feng Qingwu. Every step he took was filled with danger, and every step he took was filled with killing intent. As he had not run into any danger, unknowingly, Wu Qi had relaxed the string in his heart. Smacking his lips, Wu Qi frowned and said, perhaps, things are not as ridiculous as fellow Taoists said? At least, most of the people I've met are good people. Suddenly, Wu Qi thought of Patriarch Jiang Yun, the immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, and the numerous immortals from Yuanhua Sect. Apart from Taoist Min and Taoist Mo Luan, who had some conflicts with Wu Qi due to some old grudges, generally speaking, all the immortals he had met were good people. Supremacy 3 Flame grinned disapprovingly. As he was about to give Wu Qi several tens of thousands of negative examples he had met over the years to teach him a lesson, Wu Qi suddenly cried out in surprise. Hastily, he fished out a 1 foot and 2 inches long jade tablet from under his sleeve. The jade tablet was emitting a blinding red gleam, and a deep buzzing noise kept ringing out from it. It was a warning jade talisman crafted using the blood essence of the green centipede and green centipede. Whenever someone from Yuanhua sect was in danger, he just had to activate the jade talisman, and all his fellow sect members within the same heavenly realm would receive the message. At the moment, the red gleam on the jade tablet was extremely strong, and the person in danger was only several millions of miles away from Wu Qi. If Wu Qi exerted all his strength and used the teleportation technique that only heaven immortals could perform, it would take him about 15 minutes to arrive at the scene. Fellow Taoist 3 Flame, a disciple of my sect is in danger nearby, and I need to go and have a look, said Wu Qi anxiously to Supremacy 3 Flame. If fellow Taoist wants to go to Xianglu City, please go now. Before his voice could fade away, Wu Qi's body flickered as he broke through the void and teleported forward. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, he had used up 90% of his energy in just one breath to travel a distance of 1 million miles by breaking through the void and teleporting. With the depletion of his energy, Wu Qi quickly took out some spirit pills and swallowed them, busying himself in recovering his energy. A red gleam flashed behind him as Supremacy 3 Flame arrived at the scene. He grabbed Wu Qi and teleported forward. Is Lao Tzu the kind of bastard who would leave his companions behind to reap some benefits? Lao Tzu's cultivation base is stronger than yours. Chapter 474. Amidst the lofty mountains was a desert that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. It was surrounded by steep cliffs and precipitous cliffs, which surrounded the vast expanse of yellow sand in the middle. Countless beast bones were piled up in a disorderly manner in the desert. The wind blew the quicksand through the gaps between the bones, causing it to buzz under the sunlight. A gloomy and dangerous aura was lingering under the sand. Taoist Chi was lying on the ground with a gloomy face under the foot of a steep cliff in a corner of the desert. His eyes were staring blankly at the sky, and no one knew what was going through his mind. A 1 foot and 2 inches long jade tablet was stabbed crookedly into the sand next to him. It was emitting a faint red gleam and producing a melodious cry. The bodies of several dozens of huge sand snakes were piled up on the sand before Taoist Chi, as well as countless colorful scorpions that were cut into halves by the sword energies. Some tiny sand ants were seen shuttling back and forth across the sand, laboriously carrying the flesh and blood of the sand snakes and scorpions back to their nests. Taoist Chi's body was soaked with pale golden blood. There was a transparent hole on his right chest, where his Taoist robe was torn to shreds, exposing a large patch of pitch-black muscles. The fangs of the venomous sand snakes must have pierced through his chest, and the deadly poison was invading his body and devouring his life force. Suddenly, a flame flickered in the sky above the desert, as Supremacy 3 Flame rushed out together with Wu Qi. If Wu Qi were to travel by teleportation, he would not be able to arrive here in less than 15 minutes. However, with Supremacy 3 Flame's help, both of them arrived at their destination with just a single teleportation. It only took them a second to arrive at their destination. Taoist Chi's dull pupils constricted abruptly. He stared at Supremacy 3 Flame, who stood right next to Wu Qi, and asked with surprise, "Wu Qi, who is this fellow Taoist?" Riding on a sword beam, Wu Qi flew and came before Taoist Chi. He knelt down on one knee before Taoist Chi and pressed his palm on the wound on Taoist Chi's right chest. Silently exercising the hand of web, Wu Qi slowly exerted the force in his palm, sucking out the venom from Taoist Chi's wound bit by bit. The venom flowed into Wu Qi's palm, and the scalding venom turned Wu Qi's palm black. With his body trembling slightly, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "This fellow Taoist is Supremacy 3 Flame, a good friend I've just made today." Supremacy 3 Flame landed on the cloud. He bowed his head and looked at Taoist Chi, then said in a strange voice, "You are really lucky. To be bitten by a green-patterned sand snake, a puny celestial immortal like you can actually—" Before his voice could fade away, Supremacy 3 Flame suddenly let out a furious roar. The dragon skin fire pouch shot out from his waist, unleashing 18 true flames of 9 yin and 9 yang that wrapped him up, transforming into a curtain of fire that protected him in the center. An indescribably terrifying force gushed out from the side and accurately bombarded the fire curtain. The fire curtain was suddenly shattered, and the dragon skin fire sac was also annihilated. It was annihilation, a complete annihilation that left no trace behind. Supremacy 3 Flame howled miserably as he pointed his finger out. A golden spirit talisman shot out from his fingertip as he cried out, "The stars spin, and the seas turn into mulberry fields. Life-changing talisman, go." As the spirit talisman disintegrated, Supremacy 3 Flame's skin suddenly bulged. Amidst a tearing sound that numbed one's ears, Supremacy 3 Flame's bloody body sprung out from his skin, transforming into a beam of dark light and fleeing at top speed. The golden light emitted from the disintegration of the spirit talisman wrapped up Supremacy 3 Flame's skin. His skin wiggled and wiggled, transforming into a humanoid puppet that looked exactly like Supremacy 3 Flame. The life-changing talisman had the same function as the soul replacement puppet Wu Qi used in the past, a miraculous item that could save its master's life at a critical moment. The invisible and traceless destructive force struck the humanoid puppet and destroyed it without a sound. Supremacy 3 Flame, who had fled hundreds of miles away in a beam of dark light, let out a miserable howl as his body below his neck suddenly turned into a shower of light and drifted away. A beam of dark light wrapped around Supremacy 3 Flame's head and sent it flying hundreds of feet away before it ran out of strength and fell heavily to the ground. Obviously, The power of the life-exchanging talisman was not as strong as the invisible and traceless destructive force. When Supremacy 3 Flame's life-exchanging puppet was destroyed, the destructive force followed the aura and hit his body, nearly turning him into nothingness. Supremacy 3 Flames had rolled a few times on the ground. Abruptly, he opened his eyes and recited a few incantations, preparing to transform into a beam of light and fly away. But all of a sudden, a beam of blood-red light shot over from the side, piercing through his left temple and coming out from his right temple, nailing his head to the ground. The blood-red light was actually a strange spear, several feet long and as thick as a thumb. Its surface was covered with countless bizarre patterns that looked like snake scales, from which blood energy kept bursting out, transforming into numerous blood-red runes that wrapped tightly around Supremacy 3 Flame's head. Supremacy 3 Flame let out a miserable howl of despair. He opened his mouth and roared furiously, with drops of blood spraying out of his torn throat. It was a very miserable scene. Wu Qi stared at what had happened in a flash with great shock. While he was still sucking the poison out of the wound on Taoist Qi's chest, Supremacy 3 Flame had been easily beaten to the brink of death. Wu Qi exerted strength on his legs and was about to leap up. "What is going on here?" he snapped. Taoist Qi sighed faintly. All of a sudden, he thrust both palms forward, unleashing 2 immortal talismans that glinted with a white light and hit Wu Qi's chest on both sides. Clouds and thunderbolts burst out abruptly, and Wu Qi howled miserably as his chest was blown to pieces, sending him flying backward in a sorry state. A severe pain kept surging into his mind. The muscles on his chest were blown away, and both rows of his ribs were crushed into bone shards. He was also thrown far away. Wu Qi's bloody chest was exposed in front of everyone. He howled miserably with a great pain, and his mind was completely blank. Together with a few disciples who used the names of rare birds as their names, Taoist Min sprung up into the sky from the surrounding sand. In his hand was a small strip of cloth that was slowly turning into ashes. He sighed pleasantly and said, "Luckily, Master had the foresight to give me this talisman first. Otherwise, how long has this kid been in Pangu continent? I can't believe he has already hooked up with such a formidable immortal." Without uttering a word, Mo Luan and the few Taoists unleashed their sword beams. They did not use the usual technique of controlling the swords with immortal energy. Instead, they directly sent out their immortal souls and placed them on the immortal swords. Controlling the swords with immortal souls and fusing them into one was the most powerful and ultimate technique of controlling the swords for immortals. Unless they were forced into a desperate situation, no immortal would take the risk of fusing their immortal souls with the sword beams. As soon as the swords and souls fused into one, a few sword beams burst out with a dazzling brilliance. After that, the brilliance quickly retracted and transformed into a few foot-long sword beams that looked like they were carved out of crystals, tearing through the void. Before Wu Qi could see the trajectory of the sword beams clearly, he felt a cold sensation on his left shoulder. One of his arms was ripped off by the sword beams, and the sword beams ripped his fallen left shoulder into countless pieces of blood and flesh. With a muffled snort, Wu Qi twisted his body. Immediately, the heavenly outfit of Gale, which he had hidden in his spiritual ocean and nourished with innate energy, transformed into a green wind and shot whistling out. A green Taoist robe appeared on Wu Qi's body. The other few sword beams that shot at the green wind were pushed far away by the wind, and nearly injured the immortal souls attached to the sword beams. Wu Qi was filled with regret. If he knew the heavenly outfit of Gale was so powerful, he would not have hidden this life-saving immortal outfit in his spiritual ocean. Otherwise, he would not have been injured today. The heavenly outfit of Gale was severely damaged, and its item spirit was now in a deep slumber. It had lost the ability to sense danger and protect its owner. Therefore, he should have worn it all the time. He had been too careless. Not only the heavenly outfit of Gale, even the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield was severely damaged not long ago. As a result, Wu Qi had hidden it in his spiritual ocean and carefully nourished it, and its item spirit had long fallen into a deep slumber. Otherwise, with the protection of these two extraordinary treasures, even if Wu Qi was injured today, he would not have been injured so badly. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi staggered a few steps back, then glared at Daoist Qi and growled, "Grand Ancestral Master, what are you doing?" Daoist Qi sprung to his feet, took a step forward slowly, and said in a deep voice, "I can't let you return to Green Cliff Planet." A bright idea suddenly flashed in Wu Qi's mind. Suddenly he roared furiously, "Why? If you don't let me return to Green Cliff Planet, you're going to use you to plot against me, a junior? Why is that? Because." At that very moment, the monstrous analytical ability of Lu Xiaobai and the darkest and heaviest life experience of Wu Wang had played an amazing role. Wu Qi laughed bitterly and said, "Huh, for Zhonglu? For the future of Yuan Hua sect? For the sake of Yuan Hua sect, you want to control Zhonglu? Don't tell me Patriarch Yuan Hua wants to make Zhonglu his granddaughter-in-law?" Daoist Qi did not answer. He tilted his head and looked into the distance. Daoist Min sneered and said, "Cut the crap." Laughing strangely, he said gloatingly, "With Zhang Li's innate talent and divine abilities, it is only natural that she should become one of us. Only then can all the disciples in the sect feel at ease." Daoist Mo Luan said coldly, "Our disciple, Wu Qi, was involved in the War of Immortals when he was traveling around Pangu continent. Princess Zhongli fell in love with young Master Yuexin, and on a certain day, she married young Master Yuexin. This is a match made in heaven, and the heaven wants Yuan Hua sect to prosper." A chill ran down Wu Qi's spine. He gave Daoist Min and Daoist Qi a look, then suddenly transformed into a gust of wind and sped away. After teleporting next to Supremacy 3 Flame's head, Wu Qi pulled out the spear and threw it into the distance. Grabbing onto the head, which still had a tenacious life force, he quickly transformed into a gust of wind and sped away. The bloodline of Gale was roaring in Wu Qi's body, while the heavenly outfit of Gale had also sent a wisp of pure wind element energy into his body. With that, he transformed into a gust of wild wind and sped away with many afterimages behind him. Together with a few immortals from Yuan Hua sect, Daoist Qi and Daoist Min, broke through the void and sped towards Wu Qi. After all, Wu Qi's cultivation base was not as strong as Daoist Qi and Daoist Min, the two senior heaven immortals of Yuan Hua sect. Not long after he fled, the few immortals had teleported next to him, unleashing various immortal spells and restrictive spells at the same time. A muffled snort rang out as the heavenly outfit of Gale emitted a dazzling green light that wrapped around Wu Qi, shielding him as he fled into the distance in a sorry state. All sorts of immortal thunderbolts, sword beams, and magical treasures smashed onto Wu Qi's body like raindrops, but they could only cause the green light transformed from the heavenly outfit of Gale to spin, and could not hurt Wu Qi's body at all. Daoist Min stamped his feet anxiously as he cried out furiously, "Senior brother, what are you waiting for? This fellow is protected by such an immortal item. When are you going to use the spirit talisman given by Master?" Daoist Qi breathed out a long sigh as an inconspicuous little strip of cloth appeared in his hand. With a light flick of his wrist, the strip of cloth suddenly turned into a wisp of ash. An invisible and traceless force came and smashed brutally onto Wu Qi's body. Chapter 475. Suddenly, the item spirit of the heavenly outfit of Gale woke up from its deep sleep. In a panic, it sent a clear and urgent message to Wu Qi. "Primordial gold talisman. It's a primordial gold talisman. Be careful." An invisible and traceless force smashed onto Wu Qi's body. A dazzling green light burst out from the heavenly outfit of Gale. The item spirit let out a shrill cry, as a green shadow of a Gale emerged from Wu Qi's body and spun rapidly around Wu Qi. The little bit of energy that the item spirit had accumulated after countless years of slumber was unleashed in an instant. 13 green talismans the size of a human head emerged around Wu Qi's body, each glinting with a green light and emanating a suffocating energy fluctuation. In just a blink of an eye, all 13 talismans were shattered, and the true form of the heavenly outfit of Gale collapsed with a boom. Only a thread of its true spirit managed to escape back into Wu Qi's body, together with the core of the heavenly outfit of Gale, which was composed of all the restrictive spells and formations. Before the primordial immortal item left behind by Supremacy Gale could recover its original form, it was destroyed by a primordial gold talisman that came from a primordial immortal. By sacrificing itself, the heavenly outfit of Gale had barely offset 40% of the power of the primordial gold talisman. The dreadful force, which was invisible and traceless, yet capable of destroying everything, continued to approach him. Wu Qi cried out in panic. Suddenly, the earth element dragon scale shield issued a sharp cry, as 36,000 golden dragon scales shot out whistling through the air, wheeling around him and transforming into a dragon-shaped shadow that glinted brilliantly like a real dragon. Right after the golden dragon took its final form, the power of the primordial gold talisman smashed down with a deafening rumble, shattering the dragon scales and shattering them. The earth element dragon scale shield gave a sad cry and exploded, leaving behind a clump of innate earth element energy essence that fled into Wu Qi's body and was absorbed by his earth meridians. Wu Qi's body absorbed the earth spirit vein, and a large amount of yellow gas gushed out from his body. His body's strength instantly increased by several times. Panic-stricken, Wu Qi sensed that the dreadful energy, which was strong enough to turn him into dust, was approaching him. He screamed and shot out the spirit-restricting rope and the flaming magpie sword at the same time. The spirit-restricting rope transformed into rings of purple light and wound around his body. With a flash of purple light, the spirit-restricting rope vanished into nothingness. As soon as the flaming magpie sword shot out of his body, it was instantly annihilated before it could even display its might. In a great panic, Wu Qi unleashed all his magical items, magical treasures, and spirit items. However, before the mighty power of the primordial gold talisman, they were like a few ants trying to stop an army of 1 million soldiers. All the magical treasures unleashed by Wu Qi were shattered by the despairing power of the primordial gold talisman. For a moment, a colorful firework seemed to explode around Wu Qi. One magic artifact after another was unleashed and one magic treasure after another was destroyed. The destructive power unleashed by the primordial gold talisman was still approaching Wu Qi, and it looked like it was about to hit Wu Qi's body. Forced into a desperate situation, Wu Qi let out a bitter laugh and unleashed both the sword of Greedy Wolf and the cold electric mirror, which he was most familiar with. Loyally, the sword of Greedy Wolf transformed into several dozens of black wolf heads and thrust into the void. However, when the tremendous force came pressing down, the sword was instantly turned into nothingness. On the other side, the cold electric mirror gave a sad cry. Suddenly, it sprung up into the sky, ignoring Wu Qi and trying to flee based on its instinct. However, the frightening power of the primordial gold talisman had sealed off the surrounding void. When the cold electric mirror flew less than 10 feet away, it suddenly flashed and turned into a clump of tiny thunderbolts that sprinkled down. All the magical treasures around Wu Qi were shattered. Apart from the dark hassock, which he could not use, Wu Qi's last hope was the chariot of 8 horses. With a thought in his mind, Wu Qi sent his divine will into the chariot, trying to use its power to help him escape from this calamity. However, as he was in a hurry, he did not have the time to disguise his divine will as the aura of a human emperor. The chariot of 8 horses paid no heed to Wu Qi's attempt. Instead, it unleashed a tremendous counterforce, which turned the invading divine will of Wu Qi into nothingness. Abruptly, a rainbow gleam flickered on Wu Qi's right arm. The chariot of 8 horses could sense a force that was powerful enough to destroy it pressing down from above. Abruptly, a beam of rainbow light shot up into the sky. The 8 horses of the chariot neighed in panic, pulling the chariot as they sped up into the sky and sped away at top speed. The primordial gold talisman swept across the chariot of 8 horses. Instantly, the chariot dimmed, and the colorful chariot turned into a rusty, broken object that looked like it was forged from bronze. Then, it transformed into a faint beam and sped away into the distance. Wu Qi could clearly sense that 99% of the enormous willpower stored in the chariot had disappeared. Such a tremendous amount of willpower was shattered by the primordial gold talisman with just a single strike. Wu Qi roared furiously and unwillingly. Apart from the celestial fiend puppets that could never withstand the frightening power of the primordial gold talisman, and the dark Hasek that would never listen to his command, he did not have anything else with him. A despairing roar came out from Wu Qi's mouth. Risking everything, he released 10,000 longbow men from the spirit-breeding ring. Ha! Amidst the loud roars, these longbow men rushed out from the ring, immediately forming into a huge battle formation of 10,000 men. 10,000 longbow men, who were on the verge of breaking through the realm of nascent soul, had the overall strength to fight against a nascent divinity cultivator. The enormous energies of 10,000 longbow men merged into one, transforming into a nearly corporeal killing intent that towered into the sky. Right when the killing intent rose, it was immediately shattered by an invisible force. The enormous force unleashed by the primordial gold talisman shattered everything. Those longbow men howled and howled miserably as their bodies disappeared inch by inch, turning into nothingness. They could clearly see their own bodies disintegrating without any pain. Every inch of their bodies disappearing was taking away a part of their souls. When their bodies completely disintegrated, their souls turned into nothingness as well. Faced with the remaining power of a primordial gold talisman, these longbow men whom Wu Qi had spent a great deal of effort to cultivate with countless medicinal herbs were so vulnerable. He howled miserably, and with the last glimmer of hope, he produced the Darkwater Heavenly Palace. This palace belonged to Lady Dark Goldwater and was covered with countless restrictive formations. Wu Qi only hoped that this palace could help him offset a part of the fatal power of the primordial gold talisman. Even if it could only offset a little bit of the power, it would be his chance. Just like everything Wu Qi had thrown out before, the Darkwater Heavenly Palace flickered soundlessly and vanished into nothingness. Daoist Min's laughter was heard coming from afar. Why is this kid still struggling? But where did this kid get so many good things? Daoist Min's words were filled with mockery, as well as the jealousy that was carved deep into his bones, a naked jealousy. Why was he still struggling? Why was he still struggling? Why was he still struggling? Wu Qi's eyes widened abruptly. He turned around and snapped at Daoist Min. Why am I still struggling? I'm not going to die, and I'll definitely seek revenge from you. An unprecedented resentment rushed straight into Wu Qi's heart. His heartbeat sped up abruptly, and he kept howling and howling. Suddenly, the corner of his eyes cracked, and a large amount of blood burst out from them. Daoist Qi clenched his jaws tightly and turned his head away, refusing to look at Wu Qi's ferocious face that looked like an evil ghost. Wu Qi let out a strange laugh. Suddenly, a desperate technique from Scroll of Stealing that could kill the enemy together with him suddenly appeared. While laughing fiercely, 5 acquired spirit pearls flew out from his body, followed by a few other fake nascent souls, including the Dark Nascent Soul and the Inferno Fiend Nascent Soul. A great amount of energy stones and immortal stones flew out from the Black Dragon Spirit Ring at the same time. Wu Qi kept coughing out mouthfuls of blood, which condensed into several hundred bizarre primordial runes in the air. Each of these runes was sharp and angular, and filled with a threatening murderous aura and a bitter resentment. Not only the energy stones and immortal stones, but also all other objects that contained a certain amount of natural energies, from ordinary ores to rare ores, from rare spirit herbs to ordinary herbs that could be found everywhere on the street. Apart from the fragrance Ganoderma found in the path outside the Darkwater Heavenly Palace, everything in the Black Dragon Spirit Ring was released. The 5 acquired spirit pearls were drifting in the air according to the positions of 5 elements. The primordial runes transformed from Wu Qi's blood fused with the pearls, and a 5-colored glow enveloped Wu Qi's body. It was as if the void was sealed by the strong 5-colored glow, which kept swallowing and spitting, sucking in all the immortal stones, energy stones, and various spirit herbs that flew out from the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. An enormous amount of natural energies were forcibly extracted from these objects, turning into energies of 5 elements and fusing with the 5 acquired spirit pearls. A dangerous aura spread in all directions. Taoist Min and Taoist Qi stared at Wu Qi in horror. Taoist Min cried out sternly, "Those are acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. What are you trying to do? Bastard, where did you get so many immortal stones? Where did you get so many energy stones? Where did you get so many spirit herbs? You damn bastard. What are you trying to do? Stop it, stop it." Wu Qi struck his own chest with his palm, forcing out 5 drops of his blood essence, which was the most important to him. They transformed into 5 fist-sized runes and fused with the spirit pearls of 5 elements. Right at the moment when the 5 runes fused with the spirit pearls, all the immortal stones, energy stones, and spirit herbs in the Black Dragon Spirit Ring were restored to the most basic energies of 5 elements. Disintegration of 5 elements, Great Destruction Chaos Unity Spell. Wu Qi spat out a phrase that made one shudder. He laughed in a strange voice and said, "You have forced me to do this. You have forced me to do this." Inside his 7 stealing heaven meridians, Wu Qi's 10 innate nascent souls shrunk abruptly, from the height of 1 foot to the size of a fist. A vast amount of innate energy essence rushed whistling out from the meridians in Wu Qi's arms, transforming into a 5-colored ray and injecting into the 5 spirit pearls. Like a detonator on a dynamite, the innate energy essence detonated the 5 spirit pearls in a flash. Using the innate energy essence as the trigger, the innate energy detonated the primordial runes, forcibly reversing the acquired energy to the innate. It was like a chain reaction of a nuclear bomb, unleashing a frightening power that could make a gold immortal's face turn pale. A loud boom rang out, as a ring of invisible and colorless shockwave rushed several tens of thousands of miles away. All the mountains along the way were flattened, and all the living beings were turned into nothingness. Dozens of cities with over 1 million people, as well as numerous villages and towns, were silently annihilated by the explosion. The sky was filled with ghosts who had been wronged. The power of the primordial gold talisman clashed head-on with the destructive chaotic unity spell Wu Qi unleashed with the help of the 5 spirit pearls of 5 elements and countless materials. In the center of the explosion, the 2 forces formed a miraculous balance. Holding Supremacy 3 Flame's head in his arms, Wu Qi was lucky enough to survive amidst the subtle peace in the center of the explosion. On the other hand, Taoist Qi, Taoist Min, and all the immortals they brought here had turned into nothingness, just like all the magical treasures and spirit items Wu Qi had. The heaven and earth and the void had turned into a chaotic mess. The innate and acquired energies had mixed together, rolling and rolling like a pot of porridge. Coughing violently, Wu Qi transformed himself into a gust of wind and escaped from the explosion with great difficulty, carrying Supremacy 3 Flame in his arms. In the distant green cliff planet, a few soul jade slips placed on the incense tables suddenly exploded. A few disciples who were in charge of taking care of these soul jade slips screamed and rushed out of the hall. A few moments later, Patriarch Yuan Hua's furious roar shook the entire green cliff planet. Chapter 476. Relying on the last wisp of innate energy left in his body, Wu Qi carried Supremacy 3 Flame's head with one arm and carefully avoided the boiling chaotic airflow, choosing a random direction and fleeing in a panic. After flying aimlessly for a few days and nights, Wu Qi could not hold on any longer and finally fell to the ground in a gray valley. Suddenly, Supremacy 3 Flame's head fell heavily to the ground and rolled for a long distance. Supremacy 3 Flame cried out in pain. With great effort, he managed to keep his head upright on the ground by moving his facial muscles. Lying on the ground, Wu Qi stared at Supremacy 3 Flame, panting heavily. After a long while, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm sorry for dragging you down, fellow Taoist." Supremacy 3 Flame breathed out a deep sigh and said, "Cut the crap. It is not the first time that Lao Tzu had his arms and legs broken." He spat out a mouthful of sand and murmured under his breath, "Lao Tzu has lived for so many years, but he has only had a few friends who have gone through life and death together. Only when he was about to be beaten to death did he manage to make a true brother. In that situation just now, you managed to bring me out. From now on, you are my brother. With great difficulty, Wu Qi moved his body, then slowly sat cross-legged on the ground. He raised his head and stared at the bright moon in the sky, not saying a word for a long while. His heart was lifeless, like a graveyard that had not been visited by any living person for many years, with only dead ghosts dancing in the middle of the night. Sitting cross-legged on the ground and staring at the bright moon, Wu Qi operated all his brain cells, trying to figure out why this had happened. What exactly happened? Why would such a thing happen? If it were Taoist Min and his disciples who had followed him to Pangu continent to hunt him down, he could still accept it. But why did Taoist Qi join them? It was a primordial gold talisman, which Patriarch Yuan Hua had once used to kill formidable enemies. Wu Qi had witnessed its power with his own eyes. Why did it appear in Taoist Min and Taoist Qi's hands? Why would they use it to kill him? Was it really for Princess Zhonglu? For her? So. Hey, what are you thinking about? Supremacy 3 Flames said lazily, Brother, please think of a way to heal me first. I only have a head left, and my immortal soul is dispersing. In a few days, Lao Tzu's cultivation base will drop by at least 1 tier. TSK, Lao Tzu has countless enemies, and Lao Tzu has also offended a lot of people in the union of 10,000 immortals. If his cultivation base drops by 1 level, wouldn't he be killed? Wu Qi turned to look at Supremacy 3 Flame and said in a deep voice, My great ancestral master is among them. Supremacy 3 Flame laughed mockingly and said, What is Grand Ancestral Master? Lao Tzu has seen with his own eyes that in order to cultivate the art of passionless devil, he killed his own children and grandchildren, and took their primordial yin and primordial yang to be sacrificed to the devil god. Supremacy 3 Flame sighed and said with a cold grin, Brother, do you understand now? This is the real world of cultivators. Travel the world with the woman you love? Live in seclusion? Since that woman of yours is being chased by so many people, she is either extremely beautiful, or she has some kind of primordial yin energy that is very useful to others, or she has some special bloodline that someone has taken a fancy to. Supremacy 3 Flame took a deep breath instinctively and said assertively, with your current overall strength, not to mention those people behind your great ancestral master, anyone with power and influence who sees your woman will never let her go, let alone those people behind your great ancestral master. He breathed out a long sigh and said with mixed emotions, Therefore, whenever Lao Tzu wants to do that, he will find a group of girls and have sex with them for a few days and nights. But Lao Tzu will never fall in love with a woman, and he will never let himself fall in love with a woman. Unless Lao Tzu has the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, or at least become a chief official of the celestial court, only then will he have the courage to find a good woman, get married, and have children. Otherwise, power and strength. Wu Qi said coolly. Supremacy 3 Flame hastily added, and a backer. No matter how strong your cultivation base is, without a backer and a group of reliable people around you, you will not be able to achieve anything. Lao Tzu had heard of quite a few famous itinerant cultivators who had the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, but in the end, all of them had fallen. You must have a backer, my brother. Supremacy 3 Flame licked his lips and said solemnly, You must have the power, and you must be at least a chief official of the celestial court. You must have the strength, and you must have the cultivation base of a primordial immortal. Even if you are the weakest 9th-tier primordial immortal, no one would dare to provoke you. Finally, you must have a backer. Even a primordial immortal needs a backer. For example, if you have a backer from the celestial court, no one will dare to provoke a primordial immortal under the celestial court. Wu Qi looked down at Supremacy 3 Flame's head and asked, Apart from the celestial court, are there any other powers I can rely on? Supremacy 3 Flame pondered for a moment, then blinked his eyes and said with a sigh, Apart from the celestial court, of course, there are other good powers to rely on. But Lao Tzu is too lazy to go to them, for he would be bullied by others. Also, Lao Tzu is not used to pretending to be a grandson, so, hee hee. After that, Supremacy 3 Flame began to speak with some gestures. Apart from the great celestial emperor Ziwei Lingying of the celestial court, who was nominally in control of the celestial court, there were many other figures in all the heavenly realms and Pangu continent who no one dared to provoke. Apart from the great celestial emperor Ziwei Lingying of the celestial court, there were also 5 celestial emperors of 5 directions, who were the deputies of the great celestial emperors. They were formidable figures who few people dared to provoke. Apart from the 6 figures who held the title of celestial emperors in the celestial court, there were also some famous figures on Pangu continent and all the heavenly realms. First, the Eastern Green Emperor. He was a formidable figure who had existed since the ancient times, and represented the ancient gods of the ancient god clan, including wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Second, the Northern Black Emperor. He had also existed since the creation of heaven and earth, and represented the ancient gods of the ancient god clan, who possessed the ominous powers of plagues, calamities, and so on. Third, the Western White Emperor. Like the previous 2, this White Emperor had the same seniority, and he represented the interests of the ancient god clan, including the Mountain Elves. Fourth, the Central Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor Shenyuan, the ancestor of the human race, became an almighty expert with the supreme virtues of the human race. He represented the interests of the entire human race, and was the spiritual leader of the human race on Pangu continent. Under his command were the divine dragons, the phoenix, the qilin, and even the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. Some of the demon immortals and ghost deities were also willing to submit to the Yellow Emperor. Fifth, the Southern Yen Emperor. Shen Nong, the Yen Emperor, was one of the ancestors of the human race. Just like the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan, he had attained an immortal and indestructible body by virtue of virtues. Under Yen Emperor's command were all kinds of powerful ancient races, such as the Long Bow Kingdom people and other strange races, all kinds of ghosts, demon spirits, barbarians, wild beasts, fierce birds, and even the ancient evil gods Gong Gong, Zhu Rong, and Xiang Lu, all of them were under Yen Emperor's command. Apart from these world-shaking figures, the demon realm had 7 demon emperors and 108 demon saints. The fiend realm had 9 fiend emperors and 72 fiend kings, and the ghost realm had 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost saints. Compared to the 6 celestial emperors and 5 emperors of the celestial court, these people were slightly weaker, but they were still overlords with strong overall strength. Apart from these powerful figures, there were also some other supreme existences in all the heavenly realms, and even on Pangu continent. According to the legends, in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, there was an extraordinary figure who had established a sect and recruited many disciples. Even the officials of Yu Dynasty were too lazy to provoke this figure, and allowed him to occupy a large area of the land. Supremacy 3 Flame once had a drink with an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance. The ally, who possessed the overall strength of a gold immortal, told Supremacy 3 Flame about it while laughing. Supremacy 3 Flame took it as an anecdote and asked about it. Suddenly, 2 blood-red specks of light lit up in Wu Qi's grayish pupils as he chuckled and said, "Oh, the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean? Do you know the map of that place, fellow Taoist?" Supremacy 3 Flame answered reflexively, "Of course, Lao Tzu would want to know about such an anecdote. The dark abyss of the Northern Ocean is a dangerous place that few people go to." However, Lao Tzu did ask that ally for the map. Wu Qi chuckled, but there was no warmth in his laughter. Looking up at the bright moon, Wu Qi suddenly sprung to his feet. Cupping his fist and bowing to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "I've troubled you this time, fellow Taoist. I hope fellow Taoist will accept these meager gifts." A plume of green smoke rose from the top of his head, as the last item Wu Qi had on him, the dark Yin energy vase, which could only produce various true water, flew out. Carefully, a beam of light shot out, and 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid flew out, emitting a strong fragrance. Wu Qi pointed his finger out, and the liquid flew into Supremacy 3 Flame's mouth, transforming into an enormous amount of energy in just a blink of an eye. Supremacy 3 Flame's head began to tremble violently, and his fair skin began to grow rapidly. His head flew up into the air, while a large amount of energy rushed out from his short neck, outlining the outline of his body. Sizzling noises rang out, and before long, Supremacy 3 Flame's body had fully recovered under the powerful effect of the Ganoderma liquid. On top of that, the powerful energy contained in the Ganoderma liquid had not been completely depleted, and had even improved his dermic power by a large margin. After bowing deeply to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, please show me the way to the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean." With a point of his finger, another 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid wrapped in Xianbing flew into Supremacy 3 Flame's palm. Supremacy 3 Flame stared blankly at the drops of Ganoderma liquid that were rolling and spinning in his palm. "It is Wu Qi who has dragged you into this calamity, fellow Taoist," said Wu Qi. "Please exchange the 9 Ganoderma liquid for some rewards in Myriad Immortal Alliance. I believe it should be enough to make up for your loss. As for the rest, please keep all the secrets for Wu Qi. What do you think?" Supremacy 3 Flame clasped his palm tightly around the 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid, stared at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Aren't you afraid that Lao Tzu will rob your treasure? Ha! This is the Ganoderma liquid left behind by a Ganoderma immortal." Wu Qi smiled faintly, shook his head and said, "Would you do that?" Supremacy 3 Flame was taken aback. Shaking his head, he said with a loud laugh, "Hee, I never thought that Lao Tzu would meet a man as honorable as Lao Tzu. Wonderful. From now on, you will be Lao Tzu's real brother." Then he pointed his finger at the ground, causing countless marks to emerge out of thin air. While pointing, he showed Wu Qi the way to the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean from Zhong Province. Supremacy 3 Flame did not ask what Wu Qi was going to do, but just pointed out the way in great detail to Wu Qi. After memorizing the way, Wu Qi bowed deeply at Supremacy 3 Flame, then spun and left. Supremacy 3 Flame quickly caught up with him and cried out, "Brother, you should heal your wounds first. Where are you going?" Without looking back, Wu Qi rode a cloud and flew into the distance. "Supremacy 3 Flame, let's meet again if fate allows," he cried out. After a long while, Wu Qi said coldly, "I just want to let some people know that there are some things that they should not do." With a blink of his body, Wu Qi had already turned into a gust of wind and flew into the distance. He did not turn his head again. Supremacy 3 Flame was stunned for a moment, then suddenly shook his head and sighed. "Brother, I hope you have a safe journey. Kill, but don't let others kill you. Rob, but don't let others rob you." Chapter 477. On Green Cliff Mountain, in the grand hall where all the soul jade slips of Yuan Hua sect's disciples were stored. The spacious hall was dimly lit, with only 2 eternal lamps hanging from the ceiling with 2 thin golden ropes emitting a faint light. A mountain breeze blew into the hall from outside, swaying the flame and blinking the shadows, as if there were countless ghosts wandering about in the hall. Inside the hall, numerous shelves carved out of green mountain rocks were placed neatly on top of them. Underneath each soul jade slip was a small wooden plaque, on which was written the name of the owner, as well as their position and seniority in Yuan Hua sect were written in small gold-plated characters. At the highest point of the innermost shelf was a palm-sized pale golden soul jade slip, with a wooden plaque underneath it written with the name of Patriarch Yuan Hua. Originally, there were a few cells under Patriarch Yuan Hua's soul jade slip, but now, only 2 of them had a pile of broken soul jade slips, while the rest were empty. Only the wooden plaques hanging under the cells had pale golden characters written on them. Patriarch Yuan Hua stood in the shadow, his body shivering as he stared at the 2 broken soul jade slips. His eyes were filled with tears, and 2 lines of blood ran from the corners of his eyes all the way to his chin. Blood and tears kept flowing down his cheeks. The few empty cells were the soul jade slips of a few of Patriarch Yuan Hua's former direct disciples. Yuan Hua sect had gone through several dozens of periods, and the few direct disciples whom Patriarch Yuan Hua regarded as his own children, whom he loved even more than his own sons, had fallen in the battles with other immortal sects, as well as the battles with other itinerant cultivators. Every time one of his disciples died, Patriarch Yuan Hua would feel a sharp pain in his heart, as if a knife was twisting with it. In the end, only Taoist Qi, who was honest and steady, and Taoist Min, who was smart and capable, but a little narrow-minded. After spending several dozens of periods together, Taoist Qi and Taoist Min had become the bones in Patriarch Yuan Hua's marrow, the flesh in his heart. As Patriarch Yuan Hua's cultivation of cultivating his qi and mind had become better and better, he had buried this little bit of romantic feelings in the depths of his heart. Over the years, the relationship between master and disciple seemed to have faded. But when he suddenly saw the two soul jade slips, which were broken into pieces, he suddenly realized that his heart was broken as well. The last two direct disciples were gone. The personal disciple whom he had painstakingly trained for dozens of periods, who had spent more time with him than his own son, was gone. They were adopted by Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was only a nascent divinity cultivator at that time. They were brought up in a miserable state, and when Patriarch Yuan Hua built Yuan Hua sect, the last two personal disciples who gradually built the sect, they were gone. The shattering of the soul slip was a sign that the soul would scatter and vanish into nothingness. Taoist Qi and Taoist Min, the last two disciples of Patriarch Yuan Hua, were gone. Do you know that I've successfully refined that upper-grade immortal sword? It is a 7th-grade immortal sword, and it is more than enough to make my name resound throughout Puyo Heavenly Realm. No one will dare to offend Yuan Hua sect anymore. Yuan Hua sect is about to. No, it is already the strongest immortal sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm. In the future, we will leave Puyo Heavenly Realm and spread Yuan Hua sect's prestige to the other heavenly realms. Do you know that the opportunity for Yuan Hua sect to prosper is right before our eyes? With Zhang Li's bloodline of ancient gods, Green Cliff Planet will definitely become one of the few blessed lands with immortal veins among all the heavenly realms. The current Green Cliff Planet cannot even support the cultivation needs of a mid-grade heaven immortal. In the future, as long as all the energy veins on Green Cliff Planet are condensed and refined into immortal veins by the ancient divine power, one Green Cliff Planet will be able to provide all the immortal energy needed for the cultivation of 10 gold immortals. As long as either I or any one of you become a gold immortal, I'll be able to bring you under the tutelage of that senior. Do you know that Senior is a primordial immortal? He is a primordial immortal. If we can become the disciples of a primordial immortal, perhaps. No, we will definitely become the overlord of Yu Hua Heavenly Realm in the future. Those heaven monarchs and immortal monarchs of the celestial court will not even have the qualification to stand tall before us in the future. A bright future is right before our eyes. How could you die like this? Patriarch Yuan Hua clenched his fists tightly and suddenly roared at the top of his voice. Who gave you the courage to die like this? Without my permission, how dare you have your souls destroyed? How could he dare to die so cleanly like this? Not even a wisp of your broken soul was left behind, and I didn't even have the chance to search for your reincarnations. You, unfilial disciples. The air in the great hall suddenly became thick and heavy. Numerous invisible gusts of wind were twisting and turning in the hall like great pythons, producing strange howling noises. The great hall was shaking, and all the soul jade slips were trembling. A faint blood mist was seeping out of Patriarch Yuan Hua's body, and a blood-red gleam that should never appear in his eyes was bursting out of his eyes. Patriarch Yuan Hua's meditation technique, which he had cultivated for dozens of periods, had suddenly disintegrated. With the outbreak of the 3 separations and the birth of the 5 evils, the boundless resentment immediately attracted those heavenly demons who were hiding in the outer realms of the chaotic dimension. They were invisible and intangible, but possessed mighty divine abilities. Quietly, a wisp of fiend will fused with Patriarch Yuan Hua's immortal soul. The blood-red gleam shrouding him grew stronger, and both his eyes, including the whites of his eyes, turned a frightening red. He clenched his fists tightly, and crackling noises could be heard coming from all the joints in his body. The 7th-grade immortal sword flew out with a threatening heat wave and was caught in Patriarch Yuan Hua's hand. An enormous amount of immortal energy was surging in his body. As the sword sensed the killing intent in Patriarch Yuan Hua's heart, it could not help but let out a bloodthirsty cry. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps was heard coming from outside the great hall. Patriarch Yuan Hua flipped his palm, and the immortal sword turned into a stream of flame and plunged into his forehead. The blood-red gleam shrouding him quickly retracted, and Patriarch Yuan Hua's eyes regained their clarity. With hands clasped behind his back, he asked coolly, "Green Staff and Green Melon are here?" Just in time. Immortal Green Staff and Goddess Green Melon brought Patriarch Jiang Yun into the great hall. They walked quickly to the last shelf, and when they saw the two broken soul jade slips, Chi-Chi's body trembled. Immortal Green Staff dropped to his knees and howled, "Master, how could this happen? Grandmaster, wasn't Master in a secluded cultivation? How did this happen?" Patriarch Jiang Yun was so frightened that he dropped to his knees as well. He stared blankly at the two broken soul jade slips, which represented the souls of Taoist Qi and Taoist Min. His eyes were blank, and no one knew what was going through his mind. Laughing strangely, Patriarch Yuan Hua walked slowly before Patriarch Jiang Yun, reached out his hand, and placed it on his shoulder. "Jiang Yun, what is the background of that disciple of yours, Wu Qi? Come, tell us in detail. Where did Wu Qi come from? Is he cultivating the energy unity technique that you taught him? Don't tell me that Wu Qi is able to fight against immortals with his cultivation base of nascent soul realm just by cultivating that lousy energy unity technique." Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out involuntarily, as if a thunderbolt had just struck his head. How is that possible? Ancestral Master? Could it be that the two ancestral masters, they were killed by Wu Qi? Immortal Green Staff sprung to his feet abruptly and roared, "Wu Qi? That scum who deceived his master and killed his ancestral master, he—" Immortal Green Staff's eyes turned bloodshot as well. Suddenly, the corners of his eyes cracked, and two streams of blood tears rolled down his cheeks. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "It was me who sent Chi'er and Min'er to kill Wu Qi. I even gave them the primordial gold talisman given by a senior to protect themselves. After all, Pangu continent is a place where crooks and dragons mix together. It is not an easy place for them to go." Laughing, Patriarch Yuan Hua gave Patriarch Jiang Yun a heavy slap on the shoulder and said with a sigh, "I never thought that Chi'er and Min'er would die just like that. Mo Luan and the others who came with them, none of them were spared. Their souls were all destroyed, and not even a broken soul was left behind." Immortal Green Staff's eyes went wide as he snapped, "Was it really Wu Qi who did it?" Goddess Green Melon cried out in alarm, "Why did Patriarch ask Master, Uncle Master, and others to kill Wu Qi?" The couple exchanged a glance, then turned to look at Patriarch Yuan Hua at the same time. Patriarch Yuan Hua flipped his hand, revealing a soul jade slip lying in his palm. A startling crack could be seen running across it. Obviously, the owner of the soul jade slip had suffered a very serious injury, which was why such a crack could be seen. Patriarch Yuan Hua said coldly, "This soul jade slip belongs to Wu Qi." When Chi'er and Min'er's soul jade slip shattered, his soul jade slip also cracked. Clearly, the person who killed Chi'er and Min'er is Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Patriarch Yuan Hua said bluntly, "The reason why I want to kill Wu Qi is because of Zhang Lu. I want Zhang Lu to become a member of Yuan Hua sect. A person who will never betray Yuan Hua sect. As long as Zhang Lu stays on Green Cliff Planet for a few periods, the planet will definitely become a spirit planet filled with immortal veins. At that point of time, it will not be difficult for her to break through the realm of Gold Immortal." Immortal Green Staff was taken aback, while Goddess Green Melon said straightforwardly, "Ancestral Patriarch, if this is the reason, there is no need to." Patriarch Yuan Hua interrupted Fairy Green Melon with a muffled snort, then said coldly, "Regardless of whether it is right or wrong, this is the result. Chi'er and Min'er are dead, Wu Qi must die as well, and all those related to him must die as well. Zhang Lu must marry Yuexin and become a true core disciple of Yuan Hua sect, a core disciple who will never leave us." Pressing his palm heavily on Patriarch Jiang Yun's shoulder, Patriarch Yuan Hua cried out sternly, "Tell me, what is the background of Wu Qi? Where did you recruit him?" The immense immortal pressure made Patriarch Jiang Yun gasp for breath. With a blank expression, he raised his head and told Patriarch Yuan Hua about the existence of Myriad Immortals planet. Patriarch Yuan Hua's eyes flickered with a bright gleam, while Immortal Green Staff and Goddess Green Melon had their expressions flickered. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that Patriarch Jiang Yun would have such a fortuitous encounter. In a remote place like the minor Heavenly Circle realm, he actually managed to find a priceless planet left behind by two great apocalypses. "I see." Patriarch Yuan Hua bowed his head and laughed coldly. "Well then, Green Staff, Green Melon, bring some men with you. All the cultivators on Myriad Immortals planet must join Yuan Hua sect unconditionally. Take control of their nascent divinities, and kill anyone who dares to resist. Capture all the members of Great Yan's imperial clan alive and bring them to Green Cliff Mountain." A cruel smile emerged at the corner of Patriarch Yuan Hua's mouth. "I'll use the lives of all the members of Great Yan's imperial clan to force Zhang Le to marry Yu Xing. Let's see if this little girl can still escape from my scheme," said Patriarch Yuan Hua in an insidious voice. Patriarch Yuan Hua stretched out both hands and clenched his fists tightly. Suddenly, he threw his head back and burst into tears. "Cheer, Minner, watch me. I'll definitely avenge you." Chapter 478. Amidst a forest on the island, Princess Zhang Le sat cross-legged on a thin straw mat. A small incense burner was placed next to her, from which a wisp of green smoke was drifting out, driving away all the mosquitoes in the surroundings. Peppermint and Angelica were carefully kneeling next to Princess Zhanglu, looking curiously at Ma Yi, who sat cross-legged in front of them. Ma Yi was clad in an ordinary green Taoist robe, and he looked just like any ordinary cultivator that could be found everywhere in the world of cultivators. He even carried a scabbard on his back, in which there was a lower-grade flying sword of poor quality. He nodded at Princess Zhanglu, then fished out a palm-sized jade slip and carefully placed it before Princess Zhanglu. "His Majesty and all the courtiers have left Myriad Immortals planet." Ma Yi's first words made Princess Zhanglu frown. "Everyone?" Princess Zhanglu asked. "Everyone. His Majesty, the concubines in the imperial harem, the princes, the families of all the courtiers, and the disciples of all the immortal sects of Great Yen have begun to move out 3 years ago." Ma Yi grinned and said, "Now, Great Yen has found a planet in Yuhua heavenly realm that is inhabited by mortals and has no immortal sects, and has seized the power of one of them. 3 years ago, not long after Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu left Myriad Immortals planet, Great Yen began to move out. Under the control of many civil and military officials of Great Yen, the move did not alert anyone from White Cloud Immortal Sect. When Ma Yi came to Green Cliff Planet to meet Princess Zhanglu in secret, all the properties of Great Yen had been moved out. They had taken away all the people and things that could be taken away from Myriad Immortals planet. Princess Zhanglu took the jade slip and scanned it with her divine will, memorizing all the information in it. The information was very detailed, including the location of the planet where Great Yen was located, as well as the situation in all aspects. After memorizing all the information, Princess Zhanglu clasped her palm and shattered the jade slip. "What about the other 5 dynasties?" Princess Zhanglu asked after a moment of silence. Ma Yi grinned, nodded, and said, "Just like Great Yen, the other 5 dynasties have left Myriad Immortals planet." Taking a deep breath, Ma Yi said, "It's not a good feeling to live under someone else's roof. Now that all 6 dynasties have their own heaven immortals, they have enough overall strength to cope with the storms in the outside world. So, why should we still covet what little foundation we have on Myriad Immortals planet?" He smiled proudly and said, "His Majesty said that no matter where we go, we can build a foundation that is millions of times larger than Myriad Immortals planet. Myriad Immortals myriad planet is, and of Myriad Immortals of. By planet, Myriad planet. After a brief moment of pondering with a frown on her face, Princess Zhonglu asked, "What is Grandpa trying to do?" Mai rubbed his hands. As Princess Zhongli's confidant, he naturally knew what Yen Dan was trying to do. After a moment of hesitation, he looked at Princess Zhonglu and said, "His Majesty said that since we can't live freely, we should live wildly. We will always be under the control of others, and we don't know when we will be crushed to death. So, we should build a great cause before we die." Ma Yi laughed dryly, then lowered his voice and said, "His Majesty said that after being the emperor for over 2,000 years, the people in the dynasty are all ordinary people, and he's tired of it. Since we are going to go crazy, we should go crazy. Why don't we do something to the celestial court?" His Majesty said, "Why can't he be the great celestial emperor who sits high above the celestial court?" Princess Zhonglu frowned, twitched her lips, and said disapprovingly, "With Great Yan's current overall strength, how dare he covet the throne of the great celestial emperor? Heaven immortals, gold immortals, primordial immortals. How many people are in between? Without the cultivation base of primordial immortals, who dares to covet that throne?" Ma Yi smiled bitterly, shook his head, sighed, and said, "His Majesty said that since we are already here, we should try our best. Whether we succeed or not is another matter, but we should live well. Also, His Majesty has sent out a great number of men, preparing to—" Before Ma Yi could finish his words, the green smoke rising from the incense burner next to Princess Zhonglu flickered abruptly. A tiny wisp of smoke spread out and transformed into a green smoke screen. Lights and shadows flickered within it, revealing the scene around the small island. High up in the sky, Ziyuexin and a skinny, wretched and cunning-looking man were stealthily casting a restrictive spell, trying to break the restrictive formations Wu Qi had deployed around the small island. Ma Yi turned to look at Princess Zhonglu in surprise, his eyes filled with questions. This was Green Cliff Planet, the base of Yuanhua sect. As a disciple of Yuanhua sect, who dared to disturb Princess Zhonglu like this? If it were an outsider, it would be considered as a provocation to Yuanhua sect. If it were a fellow disciple of Yuanhua sect, it would be even more unreasonable. Such an action was not honorable, nor could it be considered as a friendly gesture between fellow disciples. Princess Zhongli's face darkened abruptly. She slapped the ground with both palms and sprung up into the sky, riding a 5-colored cloud and flying up into the sky. She recognized Ziyuexin. She was the person who harassed her a few days ago and was nearly killed by her heavenly thunder. She rushed straight out of the defensive circle of the formation and came before the two men, scolding coldly, "What are you trying to do by sneaking around?" Both Ziyuexin and the man were taken aback. A ball of bright light burst out from Ziyuexin's body to protect her, while the man spun in midair. A clump of purple smoke rose from behind his back, within which was a soul shadow shaped like a loach swaying. In just a blink of an eye, the man had fled several miles backward. Clang! Suddenly, Catfish Flood Dragon appeared before the man with a blink, carrying the huge hammer in her hand. The huge hammer came smashing down with a whistling sound. The man gave a strange cry, then pulled out a tiny dagger and slashed it across the air. Surprisingly, the tiny dagger did not seem to be in a disadvantageous position when it collided with the hammer. Sparks flew from the dagger, and a deep cut was left on the hammer, nearly causing half of the hammer to fall off. Both men staggered a few steps back at the same time. "Hey, little guy, you have such a strong strength." Catfish cried out in surprise. The man gasped for a few breaths, then chuckled and said, "Big fish demon, I think your body is weak and your strength is too little, right? Tiske, why are you shouting about fighting and killing in such a beautiful scene? Hee hee, I think your hammer is hollow, right?" The man's words were filled with hostility, which made Catfish Flood Dragon's eyes go wide. She was about to strike again in a fit of rage. Suddenly, a large cloud of water rose from the surface of the ocean down below, as Lord Xiansheng rushed up into the sky with over 1,000 huge sea demons. The bodies of these sea demons, who were still absorbing the essence of the sun and moon in the formation a moment ago, were shrouded in a layer of strong silver light, which made them look even more mighty and extraordinary. Carrying huge weapons of the same size, they gave off a mighty air. Ziyuexin kept shaking his head. With a cheeky smile on his face, he looked at Princess Zhonglu, who looked angry, and said, "Miss Zixian, why do you have to scare me? I don't have any evil intention in coming here. I really don't have any evil intention. We met a few days ago, and I can't forget you, Miss Zixian. I'm always thinking about you." Upon hearing Ziyuexin's words, Princess Zhongli's face turned even stiffer and colder, as if a layer of frost could be scraped off her face. "Who are you? How dare you keep thinking about me?" she asked coldly. She pointed her finger out, and a five-colored cloud flickered on her fingertip. Princess Zhonglu was going to summon the heavenly thunder to beat Ziyuexin into a daze, just like what she did that day. Right at this critical moment, an immortal pressure suddenly pressed down from the sky, and Patriarch Yuanhua's voice was heard coming from a very far distance. "Zixian, I've decided that you will marry Yuexin. This is a good fate, and you must not miss it. In the future, your child will be the next sect leader of Yuanhua sect. It's decided. When I send someone to invite your grandfather, father, and all your relatives to Green Cliff Planet, I'll let you marry each other." Princess Zhonglu was suffocated by the tremendous immortal pressure. Although her fingertip was flickering with bright lights, she still could not summon the heavenly thunder. When Ziyuexin saw that Princess Zhonglu could not move, his lust was aroused. He came before Princess Zhonglu and reached out his hand to touch Princess Zhongli's face. While doing so, he smiled and said, "Miss Zixian, a talent like you should never be held back by a common man." Princess Zhongli's face turned purple with anger. She tried her best to circulate the divine energy in her body, but the gap between her and Patriarch Yuanhua was just too huge. There was no way she could break free from the suppression of his immortal pressure. Patriarch Yuanhua intended to force Princess Zhonglu. His immortal pressure came from afar, pressing down on Princess Zhonglu like a great mountain. Seeing that Ziyuexin's hand was about to touch Princess Zhongli's, Lord Xianxing gave a furious roar and threw the halberd out, which transformed into a purple thunderbolt and shot toward Ziyuexin. "Take your filthy hand off me, you thief!" Lord Xianxing bellowed furiously. Ziyuexin did not give Lord Xianxing another look. A great force came from the void and smashed Lord Xianxing's halberd into pieces. Behind him, the bodies of over 1,000 sea demons, who had grown to a certain level, exploded at the same time. Their flesh and blood fell from the sky, but were blocked by the restrictive spells automatically generated by the island's defensive formation. Then, a great number of thunderbolts came shooting from all directions and turned the flesh and blood into smoke. Lord Xianxing coughed up a mouthful of blood as well, and was thrown into the ocean by the great force. He did not float up for a long time. Catfish cursed angrily. She picked up the hammer and smashed it toward the man. Noticing that Catfish Flooddragon's overall strength was on par with his, the wretched-looking man grinned and teased her with words while waving the little dagger, aiming it viciously at Catfish Flooddragon's vital spots. Catfish's body was huge, so her movement was a little slow. On the other hand, the man was dodging around like a loach with oil smeared on it. His dagger produced a sizzling noise as it nearly hit Catfish's body a few times. Ziyuexin smiled complacently. His hand was about to touch Princess Zhongli's tender face, which looked like a blooming flower in spring. Right at that moment, Ma Yi stealthily soared into the sky on a cloud. When he saw that Ziyuexin was trying to violate Zhonglu, his eyes went wide with anger. With a blink of his body, he sprung to Ziyuexin's side like a mad tiger. A beam of red light flashed, and suddenly, an 18-feet-long machete appeared in Ma Yi's hand. With a flash, it sliced Ziyuexin into two halves. A ghostly howl was heard coming from the machete, as a dozen bloody fiend shadows squeezed out of it, grabbed Ziyuexin's soul and dragged him into the machete. In just a blink of an eye, Ziyuexin's soul was devoured by the machete. How dare a mere nascent divinity cultivator be so arrogant and domineering? I'm also a heaven immortal now. Ma Yi threw his head back and laughed wildly, then grabbed Princess Zhonglu and fled into the island. Catfish Flooddragon left the man and quickly followed Ma Yi into the small island. Lord Xianxing, who was thrown to the bottom of the ocean, did not need anyone to remind him. When he saw Ziyuexin was killed, he quickly plunged into the island through the channel Wu Qi had specially prepared for him. Axene. A miserable howl rang out in the void, as Patriarch Yuan Hua suddenly appeared out of nowhere, his body glinting with a strong blood-red light. Chapter 479. Feeling the wounds on his body, Wu Qi smiled happily. Every time he passed by a city on the prairie, a fiend shadow would flash out of his body. The celestial fiend puppet casually transformed into the appearance of a mortal, walking slowly towards the city together with Wu Qi. As an elite of scouting office, Yen Bugui did not need to do anything to stir up his emotions. His tears rolled down his face just a little bit slower than Wu Qi's. Elder Brother Wu, I didn't expect that we would meet again here alive. Where have you been all these days? When Patriarch Yuan Hua personally picked up the cudgel and smashed the warmth in Wu Qi's heart, the part of Wu Wang's experience and knowledge that had fused with Wu Qi's soul was finally awakened. The part of Wu Wang's soul was no longer Wu Qi's appendage, but had truly become a part of Wu Qi. Wu Qi and Yen Bugui hugged each other and wept bitterly. The ox cart had slowly come to a stop, and the youths leaped down from the pile of hay, looking curiously at Wu Qi. There was no distinction between good and evil, no justice and evil, no mercy and compassion, no tender affection. It was just a plain truth. The strong would win, and the weak would be like those people killed by Wu Qi. Even their bones could be used to beat drums. With the overall strength, Supremacy 3 Flame could slaughter Miao Yihu and the other officers and soldiers of Yu Dynasty, exchanging their heads for bloody contribution points, spirit herbs, and immortal items. With the overall strength, Feng Qingya could openly lead an army to commit treachery and wait quietly outside Myriad Herbs Hall, waiting for the last lucky man to appear. While walking forward in a daze, Wu Qi suddenly recalled Wu Wang's words. In the end, Wu Qi was just a young man who was in his early 20s. Even though he had killed countless people, he was still full of longing and hope for the world. If anyone showed him even the slightest bit of kindness, he would respond enthusiastically. Therefore, he was filled with admiration for Patriarch Jiang Yun, and he was filled with gratitude for Patriarch Yuan Hua. Apart from these celestial fiend puppets, Wu Qi also left one in Anhe City to protect, or rather, to keep an eye on Lao AI. The entire Euphoria Heavenly Palace was handed over to Lao AI, and that celestial fiend puppet could serve as the liaison between Lao AI and Wu Qi. Even with Lao AI's oath, Wu Qi was still worried about Lao AI. It was always good to keep an eye on him. There are no wild beasts that are willing to provoke a fierce tiger in the forest, because ferocious tigers were cruel and vicious. If you provoked them, they would kill you. Therefore, the ferocious tigers could roar proudly in the mountains and forests. That was the prestige of generations of ferocious tigers smeared with blood. It was the same for human beings. Human society was like a mountain, and every single person was like a beast in the forest. If you don't want to be eaten, you have to be a fierce tiger in this forest. With the overall strength, Feng Qingwu could do whatever she wanted without any scruples. Even if Wu Qi was just an innocent passerby, she could still order him to be killed. Yen Bugui grabbed Wu Qi's hand and pulled him into the village. Wu Qi stared blankly at him, blinked his eyes, and turned to look around. It was a sunny day, and it was not the middle of the night, and he did not see any ghosts. Obviously, the young man running toward him was the leader of Great Yan's scouting office, Yen Bugui, an imperial relative of Great Yan. This was a dark forest where the strong preyed on the weak. Here, there was only one kind of people who could survive, heartless people. Step by step, Wu Qi walked forward with his eyes narrowed and a smile on his face. Zixien, it will take me over 3 years to get back to Green Cliff Planet. Taoist Qi and Taoist Min are dead, and their soul jade slips are broken. Patriarch Yuan Hua will definitely kill you as soon as possible. Wu Qi walked forward step by step, his blood dripping to the ground. He murmured to himself, I can't make it back in time. You can only rely on yourself. If you can escape, I'll kill Patriarch Yuan Hua to avenge you. You can't escape, and if anything happens to you, I'll definitely wipe out everyone in Yuan Hua sect. Thank you, Patriarch Yuan Hua. Wu Qi chuckled. On this Pangu continent, the strongest would win. On Pangu continent, Wu Qi was walking step by step across a boundless grassland. Wu Qi rushed before Wu Qi and gave him a tight hug, then brought his mouth close to Wu Qi's ear and whispered, I'm Hubugue now, the Hubugue whose hometown was destroyed by the flood, and who came here to settle down. Our village is called Little Leaf Village. 2 years ago, it was destroyed by the flood, and all the people in the village were killed. Remember, Little Leaf Village is located 4,000 miles northwest of Zhongning City, in the valley of Leaf Mountain. I've been here for over a month. Wu Qi brought his mouth close to Yen Bugui's ear and whispered, Apart from you, who else is there? There happened to be a village on the side of the road. The pain on Wu Qi's chest and shoulder was very severe. He took a deep breath and gave the village a glance, then continued walking forward. Right at this moment, an ox cart came along the dirt road that led to the village, dragging a cart full of straw. A few burly young men were seen sitting on top of the tall pile of straw, talking and laughing. This grassland was the territory of Zhong Province. As long as he could get to Zhongning City, the administrative center of Zhong Province, he would be able to follow the map given by Supremacy 3 Flame and head to the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. According to the Scroll of Stealing, there was a stream of innate yang energy in the dark abyss, and it was what Wu Qi needed the most right now. Step by step, Wu Qi walked forward, feeling the severe pain that kept coming from his body. Yet he was smiling cheerfully. There were still over 4,000 miles before he reached Zhongning City, and Wu Qi planned to finish the journey on foot. This was a trial for Wu Qi, a comprehensive examination of himself. Or, in other words, a trial for himself. With one arm dangling from his shoulder, swaying like a broken hemp rope, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, Patriarch Jiang Yun, don't let me down. If you obey Patriarch Yuan Hua's order, holding Great Yan's imperial clan hostage to force Zixuan to marry you, then there will be no White Cloud immortal sect under the heaven. I'll kill every single one of your clan members. Yen Bugui lowered his voice and cried. His Excellency Su Qin is personally commanding the army, and he is the one who found out the information about Little Leaf Village. The first batch of scouting office that infiltrated Pangu continent consisted of 1,000 men. Damn it, the travel fee to come here is too expensive. Wu Qi turned to look at those young men, and he was struck dumb instantly. In addition, Reverend Li Yang would be visiting Anhe City in a few years, seizing the foundation of this land of 1 million miles in circumference. Wu Qi did not plan to spare Reverend Li Yang easily. Even though he knew the map of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, there were still many things that he urgently needed from Reverend Li Yang. Therefore, the 2 celestial fiend puppets who served Taoist Yun Zong had to stay in Greenwood Mountain. There was no mercy, no tenderness, no justice, and no kindness. Anxiety was torturing Wu Qi's heart. He was worried about Princess Zhang Li's current situation, whether Great Yan would be implicated, and whether his good friends, such as Lu Chengfeng, would be in danger because of this incident. He suddenly realized that he already had too many concerns. In this world, he had too many things that he couldn't let go. Now that he had picked them up, he could not let them go. Therefore, Wu Qi's heart was throbbing with pain, as if it was being burned by a raging flame. Step by step, Wu Qi walked past one city after another, and then one village after another. The young man blinked his eyes rapidly as he ran towards Wu Qi. The wound on his chest had been slightly treated, and the broken bones and muscles had been regenerated. However, Wu Qi did not pay any attention to the rest. His chest was a mess, with dirty blood dripping down one drop at a time. He did not deal with the broken arm. Instead, Wu Qi just wrapped a dirty white cloth around his shoulder, then continued walking forward with a swaying gait. With the overall strength, Reverend Sanle could force Hidden Heart to move out of the temple where he had lived for several hundred years. Gradually, the staggering pace became stable. Wu Qi's steps became as precise as if they were measured by a ruler. Each step was of the same size, and he walked straight towards Zhongning City in a straight line. Each step was firm, as if each step was going to leave a deep mark on the surface of Pangu continent. Among the young men on the haystack, a particularly burly young man sprung up abruptly, somersaulting and landing on the ground. Laughing out loud, he rushed towards Wu Qi and said, "Wu, elder brother Wu, why are you here? Heaven bless me, you have escaped from the flood as well. How did you get yourself wounded like this? I won't let the people around me fall into such a dangerous situation again. Zhang Lu is the woman I love, and I won't let anyone have the courage to covet her and everything around me." Wu Qi stuck out his chest. Vaguely, when he walked, he looked like Wu Wang. With the overall strength, Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath could invade in his city and make this piece of land belong to the immortal sect. "I love this damned world." Looking at the sky, Wu Qi suddenly laughed and said, "I love this damned world." But what made him feel worse was not the wounds, but Wu Qi's heart. Taoist Qi had been ordered to kill him for the innate divine ability inherited from Princess Zhang Li's bloodline, which could turn something rotten into something magical. The blatant act of seizing by force had once again brought Wu Qi face to face with the real world of immortal cultivators. He had left the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and bone-rotting and corpse worms to the celestial fiend puppet. Wu Qi was preparing to give Reverend Li Yang a surprise. As long as he was here, the surprise would definitely appear. "Master." Wu Qi repeated Wu Wang's name under his breath, carefully recalling every word Wu Wang had told him. With the overall strength, Patriarch Greenheart and the others could kill and loot at will in Qing Su Immortal Pass, and even set up unspoken rules to distribute the loot. The wounds on his body were very painful. After traveling for over 2 months, Wu Qi finally saw the lofty city wall of Zhongning City on the horizon ahead of him. With the overall strength, Wu Qi could plot against Euphoria Heavenly Palace and seize their foundation in Anhe City. After a long while, Wu Qi nodded and said, "It's true, I really love this place. In the world of immortals, the strongest would win." Along the way, Wu Qi had released all his celestial fiend puppets to these cities. The only instruction he gave these celestial fiend puppets was to survive in these cities and develop their overall strength and power. They could do whatever they wanted as long as they kept developing themselves and waiting for Wu Qi's call. Wu Qi squeezed his eyes, and suddenly tears rolled down his cheeks. He hugged Yen Bugue with one arm and cried out, "Brother Bugue, I finally get to see you again. Boo-hoo, why did you come here? In my heart, I really miss all of you." Chapter 480. The village was really small, surrounded by pastures and farmlands. On both sides of a dirt road that was less than half a mile long, there were some randomly built wooden houses and thatched cottages. These were the only buildings in the village. Looking into the distance from the spacious spaces between the houses, there were some houses and barns scattered around the pastures and farmlands. However, the heart of the village was the less than 200 houses on both sides of the dirt road. Wu Qi followed Yen Bugui on the muddy road. When he was walking slowly along the road alone, he didn't notice the wind and rain outside. No matter if it was a puddle of sewage or mud, cow dung or dog poop, he would step on it. But now, Wu Qi noticed the mud on the dirt road, and felt that walking on the mud with his bare feet was not a good feeling. A flock of hens, led by a rooster, slowly walked over from the other side of the road. The crown-crowned rooster raised its head proudly, like a human monarch patrolling its territory. Its eyes swept across Wu Qi with disdain, not even pausing on Wu Qi for a second. Wu Qi walked past the proud rooster. 2 hens clucked and flapped their wings as they ran past him. Their wings brushed against Wu Qi's bare calves, giving him a sense of life. The energy in his body, which had been dormant for over 2 months, began to flow again. The powerful green and water energies, which contained a strong life force, kept surging into his body. Wu Qi's external injuries still looked horrible and hideous, but the internal injuries in his body were healing at an incredible speed. His lungs, which had been severely damaged, were itching. This was the regenerating of new lung tissues. The itch made Wu Qi want to cough, but he forcibly stopped himself from doing so. His ribs were still full of cracks. A few sneezes or coughs at this moment would be fatal. Why torture himself? Yen Bugue greeted the people in the village with a smile on his face. The people here were as simple as the soil in the ground. They were gentle and quiet, and their humble bodies contained a tenacious heat. Wu Qi could sense the life force in their bodies, including a few old men who were sitting in the front yard, twisting hemp ropes. However, it was as strong as the life force in his body. This village is not bad. Wu Qi praised. Yen Bugue's mouth twitched and he scolded in a low voice, "Someone doesn't see it that way." The two of them walked to the end of the street. Under a large jujube tree, there was a thatched cottage that had clearly been built not too long ago. It was still emitting the rich natural fragrance of soil and straw, standing right next to the trunk of the jujube tree. The big jujube tree was surrounded by a circle of stones filled with soil, forming a circle that looked like a flower bed. Su Qin, whose hair was as messy as a chicken's nest, was squatting on top of a stone, holding a chipped clay bowl in his hand and drinking porridge made from corn residue with a long face. Su Qin's clothes were ragged, made of sackcloth, the most common cloth worn by mortals on Pangu continent. No one knew if it was because he was bitten by a dog or some other reason, but his trouser legs were riddled with holes, and there were 2 large holes on his shoulders. His flesh was exposed everywhere, revealing his fair skin and his body that did not have much muscles. Wu Qi laughed, pointing at Su Qin. Su Qin raised his head up abruptly and stared at Wu Qi's disheveled appearance for a long time. Only then did he recognize who this man, who was missing an arm, was. He let out a strange cry, threw away the clay bowl, covered his face with his hand, and ran into the cottage, slamming the door behind him. While laughing, Yen Bugue pulled Wu Qi to the door and kicked it open. He pointed at Su Qin, who was sitting on a wooden stool in the hall, rolling his eyes and grumbling nonstop, and said, "Old man, why are you hiding? Is there anything else that you can't see?" Laughing and laughing, Wu Qi came before Su Qin, bowed deeply and said, "Long time no see, old mister." Su Qin twitched his lips and breathed out a long sigh. He pointed at Wu Qi's broken arm and asked, "I thought you looked ugly enough. Why did you lose an arm?" Hey, if Zixuan saw this, she would be very sad. Waving his intact arm indifferently, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Don't worry, it can be reattached at any time. I just wanted to keep this broken arm to help me think through some things. Now that I've thought it through, when I'm in a good mood in the future, I can regrow it. It's not a difficult task." Sitting on a wooden stool next to Su Qin, Wu Qi began to tell Su Qin everything that had happened to him during this period of time. He told him everything, including how Yuan Hua sect was plotting against him, how they were coveting Princess Zhonglu, and the property he had acquired in Anhe City. Su Qin frowned. Su Qin frowned. He pondered for a long time before gently clapping his left hand. A whirlwind suddenly emerged from the ground, from which came a short young man. He dropped to one knee respectfully before Su Qin and said, "Greetings, Prime Minister." Su Qin waved his hand and said coolly, "Go back and inform His Majesty about the changes in Yuan Hua sect. If Princess Zhonglu is fine, help her leave Green Cliff Planet. If Princess Zhonglu has been harmed by them, ask the few old fellows who stayed there to think about how to wipe out Yuan Hua sect for revenge." The short young man answered. With a spin, he transformed into a whirlwind and sped away. Patting his ragged pants, Su Qin turned to Wu Qi with a dry smile and said, "It's done. Just like what you thought, it's meaningless to send this news back. It will take me over 3 years to go back, and everything will be settled by then. But at least we have to make this move." Wu Qi nodded and said, "With a few old misters there, I can be at ease." Although his words sounded nice, Wu Qi kept staring at Su Qin with a pair of shifty eyes, sizing up the holes on Su Qin's clothes from top to bottom. Su Qin's face turned blue with anger. He twitched his mouth and turned his head away, ignoring Wu Qi. Wu Qi refused to let Su Qin off the hook. Intentionally or unintentionally, he kept asking Su Qin how he ended up like this. But Su Qin just clenched his teeth and refused to answer. How could he explain to Wu Qi? Yen Bugui was amused by the scene and quickly told Wu Qi about Su Qin's embarrassing story. Su Qin was the chief commander of the 1,000 elites Great Yen sent to infiltrate Pangu continent. When Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Li left Myriad Immortals planet to reinforce Yuanhua sect on Green Cliff planet, Su Qin had already set off for Pangu continent with Yen Bugui and the others. This was the first step of Great Yen dynasty's conquest, and they were the vanguard scouts of Great Yen dynasty's invasion. In order to cooperate with this operation, Yen Bugui and the other elites of Scouting Office had taken the initiative to disperse the beast souls they had fused with since they were young, and abolished the internal energy cultivation technique they had been cultivating since they were young. They only relied on mystic medicines to preserve their strong muscles and bones, as well as the strength they had tempered. Su Qin had transcended his heavenly tribulation and attained the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal. After he arrived at Pangu continent with 1,000 elites, he immediately gathered information and found all kinds of excuses to spread Yen Bugui and the others to various cities and villages in Zhong province. For example, Yen Bugui had taken the identity of a refugee from a small village that had been completely destroyed by a flood, and had taken root in this peaceful village. But Su Qin was unlucky. He had used a mystic technique to suppress all his strength, and was now no different from an ordinary old man. Originally, Su Qin thought it would be easy for him to make a living on Pangu continent with all the talents and knowledge he had, and he was a talented person who could support the entire world. Therefore, he could travel around, instructing Yen Bugui and the others in their spying work, and gathering all kinds of information at the same time. Mingling in the streets was the best way to find all kinds of sources of information. Therefore, Su Qin disguised himself according to his over 2,000 years of life experience. For the first time, he disguised himself as a teacher, preparing to teach in a city in Zhong province. Little did he know that Diyu did not have the occupation of a teacher at all. The sons of the wealthy and noble clans were taught all kinds of knowledge by the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials, but how could ordinary people have the time to learn those complicated scripts? After suffering a heavy blow, Su Qin disguised himself as a traveling physician for the second time. He was a peerless genius, and he had a very strong attainment in the field of medicine, so he could even do things like open abdomen and dissection. But the people on Pangu continent never knew what a traveling physician was. If they were sick, the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials would give them medicine, and there was no need for an unlicensed traveling physician like him. Therefore, Su Qin clenched his teeth and picked up a bamboo pole, hanging the pretense of being an ironclad fortune teller, and prepared to deceive the ordinary people with his glib tongue to earn some money. However, the business of fortune-telling was also monopolized by the Directorate of Celestials. Su Qin was nearly caught by the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhongning City. Fortunately, he was fast enough to slip out of the city. Is there a fourth time? Upon hearing Su Qin's embarrassing story, Wu Qi laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. He quickly asked Su Qin about what happened these days. Su Qin breathed out a long sigh, then turned to Wu Qi with a sad face and said, "The fourth time was the day before yesterday. I disguised myself as a traveling Taoist, and found a few rich children with good innate talents near Zhongning City. I wanted to take them as my disciples, and settle down in their homes. But..." Su Qin clenched his jaw and said, "When the people on Pangu continent heard that I'm an immortal, they immediately reported it to the government of Diyu. In order to catch me, who might be an immortal cultivator, they sent an army of 8,000 soldiers to besiege me. That's an army of 8,000 soldiers. Don't they have to spend money to eat and drink?" Wu Qi looked at Su Qin with a pitying look. The smile in his eyes was so obvious that anyone could see it. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "Pangu continent is completely different from outer heavenly realms. Immortal cultivators rarely enter the cities, as they would be killed by the soldiers of Yu dynasty. It is not that easy to take root on Pangu continent." With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi produced a dozen drops of Ganoderma immortal spirit liquid, wrapped them in xianbing, and gave them to Su Qin. "Old mister, This is the essence of the spirit liquid left behind by a Ganoderma immortal after he failed his tribulation. Every drop can save a life. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi suddenly slapped his thigh and said with a smile, "If you are talking about sneaking into Pangu continent, I do have a good plan. And He City will come in handy." Su Qin raised his brows, smiled knowingly, and said, "Are you planning to use He City as a stepping stone?" As Wu Qi was about to tell Su Qin the plan he had just come up with, a hurried clapper was heard coming from the village entrance. Chapter 481. Wu Qi, Su Qin, and Yen Bugui were struck dumb when they heard the jarring sound of the clapper, which was obviously made from a bamboo joint. They had never encountered something like this before. Although the sound of the clapper was jarring, it was not mixed with any murderous intent. Instead, it was filled with a sense of laziness. None of them knew what it meant. Suddenly, someone cried out from outside the courtyard, "Brother Hu, are you there? Someone from the government is here. Quickly gather at the entrance of the village." Wu Qi turned to look at Su Qin. Su Qin waved his hand and said, "I'm not going. I'm an old homeless man whom Brother Hu Bugui picked up in the wilderness. I'm seriously ill and have yet to fully recover. How could I have the time to meet the government?" Shaking his head, Su Qin twitched his lips and said with a lingering fear, "This Pangu continent is too strange. I've had a few encounters with the government, and each time I was chopped down by a sword. I don't want to see them again." Shaking his head, Wu Qi rose to his feet and followed Yen Bugui out of the courtyard. As his fake nascent soul was shattered by the primordial gold talisman, as long as he retracted his aura, no one would be able to tell that he was an immortal cultivator. At most, they would think that he was an unlucky and seriously wounded patient. Yen Bugui was even more straightforward. His beast soul had been released, and all his internal energy had been destroyed, leaving him with only a handful of physical strength. Therefore, he did not have to worry about anything else. Both men hurried to the entrance of the village, where several hundred villagers had already gathered under a large locust tree. An officer clad in a bronze armor, followed by a dozen soldiers, was standing on top of a boulder together with a low-ranking official who wore a green hat and a green robe, looking down at the villagers condescendingly. Next to the boulder, an official clad in a green robe and a small hat was feebly knocking on a bamboo clapper, producing a jarring noise that hurt people's ears. After a while, when he saw that no one else came out from the village, the officer gave the low-ranking official a look. The green-clothed official smiled and bowed to the military officer. He puffed out his chest and called out to the villagers below, "My fellow villagers, it's good news. The punishment court of Zhong province is looking for more soldiers, and this time, our village has been allocated 10 soldiers." The villagers were in an uproar, and the eyes of some of the young people immediately lit up. The green-clothed official said with a smile, "Everyone knows that the punishment court's punishment army is a good job. Their salary is much better than those combat soldiers in the military court, and their food and drinks are all top-notch. Each of these 10 soldiers will be given a large ingot of silver as a settlement allowance." "There are only 10 places." Yen Bugui quickly gave Wu Qi a look and asked in a low voice, "Is the punishment court recruiting soldiers because of that matter?" Wu Qi nodded his head, implying that Yen Bugui had guessed the cause of the matter. Just now, when Wu Qi told Su Qin about his experience in the past few days, he mentioned the Union of Myriad Immortals, and the bounty offered by the Union of Myriad Immortals to kill several punishment armies sent by the punishment court in Zhong province. Supremacy 3 Flame alone had killed nearly 2,000 punishment army soldiers, and together with the soldiers from the other squads, the punishment court of Zhong province would need at least 10,000 soldiers to replenish their army. If each village had a quota of 10 soldiers, it meant that they would be recruiting soldiers from over 1,000 villages at the same time. Looking at the commotion in the crowd, the green-clothed official smiled again and said, "Everyone, you have to know that joining the punishment army is a great opportunity for you to reach the sky in a single bound. You will be able to cultivate the body tempering techniques secretly passed down in the army, And if you can achieve some success in your cultivation base, it goes without saying that you will be able to strengthen your body. When you retire from the army and return to the village, the village will surely prosper. If you make a meritorious service and get promoted to a general, perhaps one of you will be conferred the title of Marquis in the future, and you will have the status of a Marquis for generations to come. The green-clothed official was eloquent, as he kept exaggerating the benefits of joining the punishment army. Suddenly, the crowd parted, and several dozens of young men from the villages rushed out at the same time. "Your Excellency, we are willing to join the punishment army." Wu Qi frowned slightly. At the same time, Su Qin's voice came into his and Yen Bugui's ears. "Bugui, go. Join the punishment army." Without hesitation, Yen Bugui stretched out both arms and parted the villagers in front of him. "Your Excellencies, I, Hu Bugui, am also willing to join the punishment army. My family is ruined, and I have nothing but strength. I'm willing to fight for a better future." The officer nodded satisfyingly. His sharp gaze swept across Yen Bugui and those young men, then he pointed his finger at Yen Bugui, who was the strongest among them, and whose muscles could be clearly seen. "This man, you are Hu Bugui, am I right? Come, find a rock and lift it up." Yen Bugui tied the hemp rope tied around his waist, then strode over to a 6 feet square rock that weighed approximately several thousand kilograms under a large locust tree. He bent down, gripped the edges of the rock tightly with both hands, and gave a loud roar. His face turned purplish red from the exertion. A series of cracking noises came from the joints of his body. The ground slightly shook, and the huge rock was lifted up by Yen Bugui. He slowly straightened his arms and lifted the rock high above his head. Chi-Chi, who was standing next to him, fell silent. Then, several hundreds of villagers cried out in praise, "Bravo!" Wu Qi turned to look at those villagers with a smile on his face. A few of them were strong and beautiful, as hot as the wild roses in the fields. Their gazes were fixed on Yen Bugui's body like flames. All of a sudden, one of the girls shouted, "Brother Hu, good job. Wow, you have such great strength." Yen Bugui laughed as he walked around with the rock in his hand, then threw it forcefully to the ground. A loud boom rang out as the rock smashed into the ground, creating a huge pit about 1 foot deep and sending mud flying over 10 feet away. The officer clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Good, good. You are Hu Bugui, right? Good, with this innate divine strength, you will have a bright future in the future. Wonderful. I never thought I could find a brave man like you today." Without needing to say anything, the officer made the decision on the spot. Yen Bugui was now one of the new recruits of the punishment army. On the spot, a fist-sized silver ingot was given to Yen Bugui as a reward. It was the settlement allowance for Yen Bugui. A wooden plaque made from hardwood was given to Yen Bugui, which was the proof of his identity as a new recruit. The officer told Yen Bugui frankly that he would bring the wooden plaque to the neighboring village, Wanhu village, and meet up with the new recruits from the other villages. Then, they would rush to the punishment court of Zhongning City and report for duty. In other words, Yen Bugui still had 3 days to deal with his personal affairs. In fact, there was nothing much for him to deal with in this village. In front of so many villagers, Yen Bugui handed over the settlement allowance to the village chief of this village, asking him to take care of his house and farmlands during the period of his enlistment in the army. The house was painstakingly built by Yen Bugui over the past few days, and the fields were also painstakingly cultivated by him. He was a homeless refugee whose village had been destroyed, and he had no relatives at home, so this arrangement was reasonable. The village chief gladly agreed to Yen Bugui's request. Wasn't it just to clean up the house and not let the farmlands be left empty? With this silver ingot in hand, what could be difficult for him? The manpower of the village was worthless, and this silver ingot was more than enough for the villagers to take good care of Yen Bugui's house and farmlands for 10 years. Laughter and cheers could be heard coming from the entrance of the village. The remaining few dozens of young men were wrestling with each other, competing with each other on some skills such as drawing bows and shooting arrows. It took them nearly an hour to select the remaining 9 new recruits. After handing out the settlement allowance and the wooden plaque, the officer and the green-clothed official brought a dozen of their subordinates, mounted their mounts, and rode along the main road to the next village. Suddenly, there were 10 new recruits in the village. The villagers were so happy that they danced with joy, except for those young men who failed to be selected. Wu Qi and Yen Bugui mingled in the crowd, listening to the excited discussions of the villagers. The salary of the punishment army was very high. The annual salary and grain income of each soldier was almost equal to the annual income of 20 families. Apart from Yen Bugui, the families of the other 9 young men who were selected would immediately live a good life. All the soldiers of the punishment army would cultivate the secret body strengthening technique of the human army and would possess a strength far beyond that of an ordinary human being. When these young men retired from the army and returned to the village, with the protection of these powerful soldiers, the village would be able to live a peaceful life for several decades. Be it wild beasts or natural disasters, nothing would be a problem for these young men who possessed superhuman strength. Of course, if some of them could be promoted to an officer, or even be conferred the title of a marquis, as the green-clothed official had said, they would bring even greater benefits to the village. Perhaps, this small village, where most of the villagers were related to each other, could develop into a small town like the village of 10,000 households, with a population of several tens of thousands of people living together. The white-haired old village chief had already begun to excitedly recall the time when his grandfather was still alive, when the village once recruited new recruits. That time, it was unknown where the central state had sent troops, but a small village had provided 50 new soldiers at once. Although in the end, only 3 wounded soldiers with broken arms and legs returned to their hometown, relying on the strength of these 3 soldiers, the small village with a population of just over 50 families had developed into a village with over 300 families. The old village chief concluded excitedly that this was the blessing of the ancestors, which had given the village such a good opportunity. Neither Wu Qi nor Yen Bugui said a word. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi pulled Yen Bugui towards the cottage at the end of the road, getting further and further away from the excited villagers. These villagers only saw the benefits brought by joining the punishment army. How could they understand the sorrow of those dead souls who were killed by Supremacy 3 Flames Flaming Thunder? Even Wu Qi himself had killed 20,000 soldiers led by Feng Qingya in Qingsu Immortal Pass. Were the relatives of those soldiers not as excited as the villagers when they sent them into the army? Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the sky, not saying a word. He began to perfect the plan that he had just come up with, how he could make use of Anhe City to help Su Qin and Yen Bugui. Since he had bumped into Su Qin and Yen Bugui here, he would have to come up with a good plan to deal with Lao AI. When they returned to the cottage, Yen Bugui's words nearly made him choke with anger. "Prime Minister, can you support yourself on Pangu continent when you ask me to join the army? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.